The village of Lag has been at constant war with the demi-humans spread across this world. One of the soldiers, Kai, teams up with his friend Manso to take down one of the gorilla monsters, but even the power of friendship isn't enough to help him because Kai's fighting skills are absolute garbage. Now Kai is cornered and he most certainly would have died here, but at the last second, the gorilla is killed by Olha. He was appointed as the guardian of the village and blessed by the land god, and as such, he is the strongest soldier of them all. He is able to effortlessly cut the apes down one after another until eventually he comes face to face with the gorilla guardian. This is the strongest gorilla, so you think defeating it would be a challenge for Olha, but he is still able to cut it in half within seconds. Now that all the gorillas have been defeated, the soldiers start cutting into the gorilla bodies, and one of the soldiers hands Olha a ball that is suspiciously shaped like gorilla nuts. Olha drinks the liquid inside without a second thought, and after doing so, he begins to glow with a red aura. Thankfully, these things aren't actual gorilla balls, they are something called God stones. Drinking the liquid inside is known to increase a person's strength and spiritual power, so it would make sense for everyone in the army to drink at least one so they can all grow stronger. But no, the rules say that they are only allowed to drink tiny drops of it. They all get their drops, and after drinking his drop of Godstone, Kai can already feel his spiritual power increasing. So he asks Manso if he can have some more. But unfortunately, he's just a foot soldier, so there's no way he will ever get permission to drink a full Godstone. The rules say that almost all of the Godstones must be given to a guardian bearer like Olha. So even though Olha is already strong, he gets to become stronger, while the rest of the soldiers are stuck at weak power levels. And no one sees anything wrong with this system. Once everyone returns to the village, a huge celebration is held in honor of their victory over the apes. But even here, the amount of food each person gets is determined by their status. So the strong people and the children of the chief get tons of meat, while the scrubs like Kai get a small plate of miscellaneous soup. The soup doesn't actually taste that bad, but Kai wishes he could get some of the good food too, but that will never happen while he's still a low-level soldier, so he vows to train and get stronger so he can raise his status. Immediately after the banquet is over, Kai heads outside and starts training as hard as he can, but it's hard for him to train well when you've barely gotten any food to eat all day. He yells out that he really wishes he could eat some rice balls right now, and a few moments later, Manso shows up and asks Kai what rice balls are. Kai says he isn't exactly sure because the word just randomly spawned in his brain one day, but he gets the feeling that rice balls would be tasty. There's something Kai has been wanting to talk about, so he points over to the hill where the village buries its fallen soldiers, and that particular hill is for all the people who had families. It is constantly visited and maintained by the families of the fallen, but in contrast, the hill next to it is an absolute mess. It is filled with the gravestones of people that no one cared about, so nobody bothers maintaining it at all. Orphans like him are bound to end up buried in a place like that once they die, with no one to visit their gravestones and no proof that they ever lived in the village. That's why Kai wants to grow stronger and survive long enough to live a meaningful life. And to do that, he has no choice but to eat his tiny food portions and train harder than anyone else. But even that wouldn't be enough to ensure his survival. He would need some kind of special ability to give him an edge on the battlefield, but he's not sure what he could use. At the same moment in the castle, Olha and his sister Jose are walking to their father's room. Olha tells Jose that she doesn't need to concern herself with war briefings because she isn't expected to fight like Olha. Even so, she tells him she wants to defend the village as well, but Olha dismisses her and says a daughter of the chief's family doesn't need to learn how to fight, and no matter how much she begs, he won't allow it. Jose thinks it's unfair that she doesn't get to fight in battles just because she's a girl. As if to rub it in, when she looks out the window, she sees Kai and Manso having fun and training. Since Manso is older and stronger than Kai, he's way better at fighting than he is, so Kai can't do much aside from play defense. Manso tells him he will never get stronger if he doesn't learn to attack, so Kai tries attacking, but when he does, he leaves himself wide open. So Manso is able to knock him back, causing him to fall to the ground and hit his head. As a result, Kai gets a massive concussion. He begins seeing memories of his past life in Japan come flooding back to him. And as his mind flips through memories, he distinctly recalls the word magic. However, when finally regains consciousness, he has no idea what magic means because the word doesn't exist in this world. This isn't the first time Kai has seen unfamiliar memories, and apparently in this world, there are plenty of people who see similar visions, but Kai doesn't think this is worth telling anyone about. Sure, the memories taught him about things like rice balls and magic, but that information is useless to him here, especially since magic was just a fairy tale in Japan anyway. But if he were somehow able to use magic, he would be able to show off during their next battle, and that would definitely raise his status. Meanwhile, over in the castle, the chief has just received a letter from one of the neighboring villages, and it sounds like the other village is being attacked by orcs, So in accordance with the alliance agreement between the two villages, the people of Banya are required to go help as soon as possible. The chief doesn't like the fact that he has to send the soldiers into battle again, even though they have barely gotten a chance to rest and recover from the battle against the apes. But Olda tells him that it is a soldier's duty to be marched around and to die for the village, so they don't have any right to complain. However, the chief reminds him that the soldiers are still a part of the village as well, so he shouldn't treat them as disposable pawns. Back in the barracks, Kai is having trouble sleeping because he can't get the idea of magic out of his head. Manso can tell that something is bothering him, so he asks what's wrong. Kai tells him it's not a big deal, but he had a dream about being able to create fire out of nothing, as strange as it may sound. He fully expected Manso to tell him he sounds stupid, but surprisingly, Manso says he has heard about something similar before. He was once told a story about a strange traveler who came to the village. The man wanted to start a fire, but he had no kindling on him, and normally, it would be impossible to make a fire without gear. But the man simply raised his finger and created a flame from thin air. Kai is surprised to hear that there's actually a record of someone using magic, but Manso reminds him that he only heard it from an old story, so there's no guarantee that it is true. Even so, hearing that story has motivated Kai to try learning to use magic, so the next day he heads out and finds a secluded spot so he can start training. He still isn't sure how magic works, but from what he can recall, magic requires some sort of mysterious energy, and the closest thing Kai can think of would be spiritual energy, so he tries using that. He holds out his finger and commands his spiritual energy to come out as fire, but it's not that easy. He realizes that he probably needs to gather his spiritual energy, so he begins trying to circulate it through his god's stones, but nothing happens no matter how much he tries. Meanwhile, orcs have been sighted just outside the neighboring village, and they've already killed a dozen soldiers, so the rest of the soldiers assemble to fight back. The soldiers wait outside the forest to see if the orcs are still there, and as soon as they spot the orcs, they charge in. The orcs begin attacking as well, but Manso manages to stab one through the heart immediately. Kai decides to rush ahead so he can get a kill as well, but then one of the orcs throws a dead body at him, and it pins Kai against a tree. The orc then walks up to him, and it is about to kill Kai, but before it does, it is shot by several arrows and is finished off by Manso. Manso yells at Kai for running ahead on his own and tells him to get back into the formation, but it looks like Kai hurt his leg when he got hit, so he can't walk on his own anymore. Meanwhile, Olha is decimating the orcs, and once they realize he's way too strong for them to beat, they all start retreating, and Olha refuses to let them get away, so he ditches all the other soldiers and chases after the orcs. That pretty much leaves them to deal with the remaining orcs on their own, and considering how hard it is for them to fight the orcs on their own, the soldiers are cooked. The squad leader orders all the soldiers to run and scatter so most of them can survive. But with Kai's injured leg, he and Manso have no chance of escaping the orc. Kai doesn't want to drag his friends down with him, so he stops Manso and tells him to go on without him. Manso doesn't want to leave Kai behind, but he knows he has no choice, so he apologizes and promises to visit his grave. Manso then runs off in one direction and Kai hobbles away in the other direction. He knows he is hopelessly outmatched, but he refuses to give up on his life, so when he hears the orc approaching, he tries to cast fire magic to defend himself, but it still doesn't work. A few moments later, the orc throws its blade at Kai, and it strikes his shoulder, severely wounding Kai, but on the bright side, the near-death experience makes sparks fly out of Kai's fingers, so maybe he really can use magic. But he might not live long enough to figure that out because the orc runs out of the bushes and starts strangling Kai. Just then, Kai notices the sparks coming from his finger, and he realizes what it means, so he points his hand at the orc's face, and with every bit of willpower he has left, he summons flames to burn it to death. The orc screams out in pain, and Kai manages to break free from its grip as a result. The orc eventually collapses from all the damage it suffered, and Kai is proud of himself for finally defeating a monster on his own. But there's just one problem: his hand is still on fire. He starts frantically trying to put the flames out, but a few moments later he begins to pass out because the fire is using up all of his spiritual energy. If he doesn't stop it soon, he's going to die from spiritual energy exhaustion, so he needs to think of something fast. All he needs to do is think of his spiritual energy as a dam that he opened when he used the fire magic, so to stop the fire, all he needs to do is stay calm and close the dam. But it's really harder for him to stay calm, because the orc is still alive, and it is walking towards him. Kai eventually manages to stop the flow of his spiritual energy, but the orc has already gotten to him and he can still barely move, so it picks him up and starts walking. However, it hasn't killed him yet, so Kai figures out that the orc must be blind from all the fire that it took to the face, and it doesn't realize that Kai is still alive. Kai doesn't want to die, but he knows there's no chance of surviving with the current state of his body, so he at least wants to take the orc down with him. So as the orc walks next to a cliff, Kai slashes it across the chest and both of them fall into the river below. Kai somehow manages to survive the fall and drags himself out of the water with his knife, but he is still dangerously low on spiritual energy, so he needs to act quickly if he wants to survive. He spots the orc's body nearby and this time is definitely dead, so he uses his knife to cut into it and pulls out the orc's god stone. Drinking the god stone liquid should help him regain his spiritual energy, so Kai doesn't hesitate and swallows the entire thing. As the spiritual energy begins flowing into him, Kai is already starting to feel better, so he lays down by a tree to rest. And now that he has a moment to think about it, he realizes that this is the first time he has ever drunk a full godstone before. His spiritual energy won't be an issue anymore, however, the wound on his shoulder is bleeding a lot, so he is convinced that he is still going to die out here. But on the bright side, at least he gets to die while looking at such a pretty sunset. Back in the village, all the soldiers have returned from battle and are getting ready to celebrate their victory over the orcs, but Manso isn't in a good mood right now. One of the other soldiers sees Manso looking depressed, so he comes over and tells him to just be happy instead. Just then, he notices that Kai isn't around, and he thinks it's weird since Manso and Kai are usually always together. It takes a few seconds, but it eventually clicks, and the guy realizes that Kai must have died, but instead of comforting Manso, he tells him to just get over it since Kai was worthless anyway. Kai spends the night passed out under the tree, and by the time he wakes up in the morning, he is surprised to see that he didn't die after all. In fact, he feels better than ever before. His broken leg has healed, and the cut on his shoulder has also sealed up too. He's happy with how things turned out, but he's also a bit confused because drinking a godstone shouldn't be enough to heal such severe wounds overnight. Kai thinks it might have something to do with the wall behind him, so he takes a look and realizes that it's a stone with a bunch of inscriptions on it. He tries to get a look at the inscriptions, but there's too much ivy in the way, so Kai uses his fire magic to burn it all up. However, his power is way stronger than it was before, so Kai gets blasted across the valley. While he is getting back on his feet, he takes a look at his reflection in the water, and he is shocked to see that there's a divine crest on his face now. He knows this is the sign of a guardian bearer, but a few moments later, the tattoos fade, so he assumes he was just imagining things. He walks back over to the stone so he can take a proper look at the inscriptions, but those words are in a language he doesn't understand, so he gives up and plans to start heading back to his village. He finds a cliff face that looks climbable, so he starts grabbing the rocks to escape, but for a split second, his divine crest appears again, and he accidentally crushes the rock he was holding onto. He falls back into the valley, and initially he thinks the rock must have been weak, but then he grabs another rock and he is easily able to crush this one as well. He realizes that he must have gotten a major power boost from drinking the godstone, and Kai is really happy about it. But while he is celebrating, he hears a voice telling him to go, and he doesn't want to find out where it came from, so he starts climbing the cliff at full speed. Once he gets to the top, he is amazed by how easy that was, and he is even more excited about his new strength than he was before. But he wonders if this is really the power of God's protection. The divine crest as a symbol of a guardian bearer is said to be granted by the land gods, but Kai doesn't recall ever getting power from a god. It might have happened while he was unconscious, but until Kai knows all the details, he had better keep this a secret from the other villagers for now. Back in the village, Manso has just finished making a grave for Kai, but just then, Kai comes walking up like nothing happened. Manso is really happy to see Kai again, and things pretty much go back to normal after that, with Kai going back to his usual duties. Only this time he's really good at his job. He was only meant to plow a small section of the field, but before he knew it, he had plowed the entire thing, and he barely even broke a sweat. Kai panics for a second because he is worried that his divine crest might be visible, but after looking at himself in the water, he realizes his secret is still safe. The crest probably only appears when he is trying his hardest to do something, so as long as he doesn't work too hard, he should be fine. The others ask him if something happened because he seems way stronger than before, and Kai can't think of an excuse, so he just admits that he drank the godstone of the orc he killed. The others are shocked to hear that since regular soldiers like them don't get to drink full godstones, but since Kai was injured and about to die, he had no choice. In fact, on his way back to the village, he had to drink the godstones of almost 40 orcs that he came across on the battlefield. So the others now understand why Kai is so strong, and Manso congratulates him for making it back alive. Meanwhile, one of the village women, Elsa, is spending a lot of time staring at Kai, so her friends start teasing her over it. At the same time, over in the village, Princess Joes goes over to the storage house to meet with the inventory checker. He tells her that he has finished preparing all the grave offerings, so she can depart for the grave cleaning whenever she wishes. Early the next morning, Kai is out practicing with his fire magic, and it has definitely gotten stronger since last time. But while he was doing this, Joe walks up and asks him to explain himself because he looks pretty suspicious right now. Kai can't disobey a direct order from the princess, so he tells her all about his fire ability. However, Joe doesn't seem too surprised by it since she has heard about similar abilities before. Although, ability users are usually members of special families or monks, so Kai is a bit of a rare case. Especially since he doesn't seem tired at all, even though he must have used a lot of spiritual energy. Bose recalls hearing a rumor that Kai suddenly became stronger after eating a bunch of godstones, so he must have a larger pool of spiritual energy than the average person. Koz asks Kai to train with her, and he has no right to refuse, so a few minutes later, the two are fighting the practice spears. Kai may be a lot stronger than he was before, but Josie is a guardian bearer, so he can't overpower her without straining himself a little, but he also doesn't want to accidentally reveal his divine crest if he tries too hard, so he needs to be careful. Once the duel is over, Kai heads to the well to get some water, and he is honestly surprised that he managed to get through the training so easily because he was holding back to avoid revealing his divine crest. That means he is so powerful that even a guardian bearer like Joe's would stand no chance against him if he were to fight with his full strength. Just then, Joe asks him to bring her some water as well, so Kai rushes back over to her, and while she's washing her face, he asks her if all guardian bearers are equally strong. Joe tells him that she's actually one of the weaker ones because her father and brother are much stronger than she is. The strength of a guardian bearer depends on the protection of their land god, but the guardian bearer must also train on their own to get stronger. And when it comes to training, Josie is severely lacking. Technically, she doesn't need to train because women aren't required to fight in this village. However, as a guardian bearer, she has a duty to protect the people of this village in battle, so she needs to get stronger as well. Besides, the duty of a guardian bearer isn't just to win battles. Kai is confused, but before he can ask her to explain, a rooster makes the morning wake-up call, and Joe's technically isn't supposed to be out here, so she has to get back to the castle before she is seen. Before she leaves, Kai asks her if she can explain what she meant when she said guardian bearers do more than just win battles. She has grown fond of Kai, so she would like to explain it to him, but it's against the rules, so instead, she asks him if he would like to accompany her on her monthly grave cleaning duty. Her land god is enshrined in the Ida village, so she will make the necessary arrangements for Kai to come, and once they are there, she will be able to explain everything. Kai agrees to her terms, so a few days later, Jozo, along with Kai and a few other soldiers, head for the Ida village. They were assigned to protect Josie in case anything happened because this place is ape territory, but the guys find it a little odd that they were randomly chosen to escort Kozu when a different squad usually handles it. One of the soldiers in K's squad heard a rumor that Joe's personally requested for Kai to accompany her, which is why the entire unit got assigned to the job. He asks Kai if it's true, and Kai is about to confirm it, but Manso interrupts him mid-sentence and tells the others to leave Kai alone because there's no way the princess knows who he is. Eventually, they arrive at the Ida village, and to Kai's surprise, it is nothing but a pile of ruins. The village was overrun by monsters years ago, and as a result, the villagers were forced to abandon it. But there's still a gravestone here, and it is their duty to maintain it in the name of the land god. Although the power of the land god of this village has dwindled so much that the land is already completely barren. Just then, Joe's comes over and says she wants to take a look around the village, so she needs a guard to accompany her. The man immediately offers to escort Joe's, but she tells him she actually wants Kai to do it instead. Kai and Joe start walking around the village, and when they get to a small flower garden, Joe's kneels down and starts praying. Kai wants to ask what she's doing, but she needs absolute silence, so she tells him to stay quiet. Red aura suddenly begins to pour out of Joe's body onto the flowers, and when she is done, she explains that she was simply praying for the land god's grace to gather here. This is a job that only guardian bearers bound to a land god can do, but since this village was abandoned, her land god's spirit has grown very weak, which is part of the reason why she isn't as strong as her brother or her father. And while the village of Lag is able to grow tons of good crops thanks to her father's strength, she is barely able to maintain this little flower garden with her power. For this reason, Jogues' father has never neglected his training because if he were to let himself grow weak, then it would be the end of Lag village as a whole. While land gods do grant power to the guardian bearers, that power is dependent on how strong the individual is, which is why all the guardian bearers have to train and drink a ton of godstones. Kai and Joe's eventually return to the rest of the group, and it's time for them to clean the gravestone, so they all head down into the ruins while a few soldiers stay behind to stand guard. While Kai and Joe's are cleaning the gravestone, he takes a close look at it, and he realizes it's the same thing as that stone he saw in the valley. And when he touches the inscription on this one, all the words are automatically translated in his head. The inscription mentions the name of the land god that this gravestone belongs to, so Kai goes around to the other side to read more, but for some reason he can't read this part of the text. He can understand the individual words like pact and temple, but the words don't form a complete sentence, so he has no idea what it's supposed to mean. Joes notices Kai talking to himself, so she asks him if something happened. Kai is about to say something, but then gets caught off guard by Joes' cleavage, so he looks away and stays quiet. Suddenly, soldiers come in and warn everyone their group of apes are heading this way. They all rush outside and begin hiding the grave, but before they could leave, the apes show up, so the captain orders Kai and Manso to escort Joes back to the village, while the rest of them hold the apes off. However, while Kai and the others were fleeing, 2 apes cut them off, so Manso steps up to fight them. However, the ape tramples all over the flower garden that Joes has been working so hard to protect, so in a fit of rage, she rushes out and declares that she will kill it for what it has done. The ape is initially intimidated when it sees Joes' tattoos, but she has almost zero real combat experience, so she's shaking with fear. Once the ape realizes that she's a novice, it tries to kill her, but Kai jumps in and slashes it across the chest. Kai then spots the second ape attacking Manso's group, so he grabs the axe on the floor and uses it to slash the second ape in the shoulder, before jumping into the air and stabbing it in the head. Everyone is shocked that Kai was able to take the apes down so easily, but Joes is especially shocked because for a split second, she saw the Guardian Bearer tattoos on Kai's face. After returning to the village of Lag, Joes gets yelled at by Ola because he heard about how she nearly got herself killed after jumping into battle. He yells that this is exactly why he doesn't approve of her fighting alongside the soldiers, but Moloch calms him down. The most important thing is that Joes is safe, but for now, he thinks they should focus on increasing patrols around the area since the inspector will be coming soon. Olha agrees and heads out to inform the soldiers of the new patrol schedule, and once he is gone, Joes apologizes to her father for causing so much trouble. However, Moloch isn't angry. He has already heard the whole story, including the part where Kai single-handedly killed 2 apes, so he is excited to see what Kai does in the future. Meanwhile, Kai is out doing a couple of chores when he gets grabbed by a few of his friends. They are teasing him because everyone is calling Kai a hero for saving Joes during the expedition to Eda village, and there are rumors that Kai and Joes were getting really close out there. A few of the girls see this happen and think the boys are just messing around again, but Elsa can't take her eyes off Kai, so the others realize she must really like him. They tease her about it and warn her that if she doesn't go talk to him soon, someone else is going to steal Kai away from her. And it looks like they were right, because a few minutes later, Joes approaches Kai and says she would like to talk to him in private. Kai agrees to talk to her even though he has no idea what this is about, so the two of them walk into a back alley. First of all, Joes wants to formally thank Kai for saving her life in Ada. However, she could have sworn that she saw a divine crest on Kai's face while he was fighting the apes. But after taking a close look at Kai, she is convinced she was hallucinating because what are the chances that Kai randomly became a guardian bearer? Anyway, her failure in battle made her realize just how weak she is, so she plans to devote herself to training as much as possible to grow stronger. And she expects Kai to join her every morning from now on. Kai doesn't want to get roped into Joes' training, but he can't deny her request, so he agrees to train with her in the mornings. The whole time, Kai's friends have been spying on him from behind a tree that's way too small to hide them. And they have no idea what Kai and Joes are talking about, but they are really jealous that Kai gets to hang out with her. Later that day, Kai goes on with his business and starts chopping some wood when suddenly Elsa comes over with a bowl of water. Kai asks her if the water is for him, so Elsa explains that she thought he might be a little thirsty after all this work. Kai is grateful since he really was feeling thirsty, so he thanks her for being so considerate. Just then, one of Elsa's friends comes over and tells her to hurry up because they still have work to do. Kai just thinks she was being nice, but Manso knows what Elsa is trying to do, so he tells Kai he's a lucky man. Just then, Kai hears a strange bird call in the distance, and he recognizes it as the same one from the valley, but he's not sure why he's hearing it here. Later that night, Kai is trying to go to sleep, but he keeps hearing that bird call, so he gets out of bed and decides to follow it. There's a huge wall around the village, but with Kai's current strength, he is easily able to leap over it in one go. He then goes 0 to 60 in half a second and runs all the way back to the valley where this all started. Once he gets to the tree, he spots the stone tablet again, and now that he knows that this is a god's gravestone, he tries to read it, but for some reason, he can't. Even so, he thanks the god for saving him and spends the rest of the night diligently cleaning the stone. He even leaves a little offering for it before making the journey back to Lad village. But along the way, he gets a little hungry, so he drinks some water from the river and picks a few fruits off a tree. He is amazed by the amount of food he can get in the forest, so he wishes he could live here, and then a great idea comes to mind. He could just build a house for himself out here. But to make a house, he's going to need to get some wood, so he climbs a nearby cliff and finds a tall woody tree to cut down. Although now that he's up close to it, he's not sure how he's going to cut it down. He has his dagger with him, but a dagger is not going to be strong enough to cut a tree that's as big as this. Instead, Kai uses his fire magic and raises the output to form something like a fire blade on his hand. But while this may have worked for metal, a tree is made out of wood, so Kai accidentally starts a forest fire. Luckily, he managed to put the fire out before it got out of control, but he still needs to think of a way to cut this tree down. He was able to create fire from nothing, so he should be able to think of something to cut a tree down. And all of a sudden, a memory from high school chemistry comes flooding into his mind. And Kai must have paid attention in class during his past life because he now remembers everything there is to know about molecular structures. Now he knows that if he wants to cut the tree down, he just needs to find a way to break the bonds between the molecules, so he puts his hand up against the tree and starts trying to manifest his spiritual energy in a way that will allow him to cut through the tree. However, before he could get it to work, he hears something moving nearby, and it's coming from the direction of the valley, so he decides to go check it out. And as we look back at the tree, we see that Kai really was able to split the tree's molecules. Once Kai gets to the valley, he finds a group of children with climbing gear who look like they are about to climb down into the valley. Kai doesn't know what their intentions are, but it's his duty to protect that valley, so he jumps down fully prepared to smack a couple of children. But to his surprise, once he gets a bit closer, he realizes that these people aren't children. They're just short. Their leader steps forward and introduces himself as Porik, the chief of the Kora people. Kai has never heard of the Koras before, and he thinks it's strange that their leader is able to speak the human language fluently. He explains that he and his people have had some interactions with human merchants before, and apparently humans consider their goods to be of high quality. But that's not important right now. Porik wants to apologize for coming here without permission. He explains that they are here to fulfill an ancient agreement they have with the great valley god that resides here, and from what they know, the valley god resembles a human, so they believe Kai is the valley god. Porik goes on to explain that the Koras have quietly lived in these woods for generations while worshipping the land gods, but a few days ago, the orcs attacked them in an attempt to take their land god. The Koras are really weak, so they stood no chance of winning and were forced to flee their home. Porik addresses Kai as an ancient arbitration god and asks for his help to reclaim their home. Kai is having a hard time processing all of this, but first, he wants to know what an arbitration god is. Porik explains that the legends say that an arbitration god is one who has received power of all creation in order to protect the creatures of the forest, but Kai finds it hard to believe that the legend is talking about him. Just then, one of the Koras speaks up and says he doesn't believe Kai is an arbitration god because the legends say an arbitration god should be a fierce warrior who punishes those who disturb the peace of their land, and Kai doesn't look fierce in the slightest. However, Porik says he is absolutely certain that Kai is the arbitration god because he can see it clear as day. Figuratively. Years ago, Porik once incurred the wrath of the valley god by entering this valley without permission, and as punishment, the valley god took both of his eyes. But in exchange, Porik gained the ability to see the spiritual energy of the world around him, and when he looks at Kai, he can see the energy of the valley god flowing through him. So he must have received the valley god's protection. And besides, they already offered a sacrifice, so Kai has to help them. Kai gets confused by the mention of a sacrifice, so Porik explains that earlier today he sacrificed his granddaughter Aru to the valley. Kai panics and asks them to show him where they left Aru, so they lead him to the rope that Aru used to descend into the valley. But that rope snapped a while ago, so she probably fell to her doom. Kai jumps down into the valley and finds Aru's body at the bottom, and thankfully she's still alive, but she's also bleeding a lot, so she won't last much longer. Kai remembers how his injuries healed when he first found this, so he tries to do the same thing by using magic. All he needs to do is imagine the injuries being healed, and as he does this, he is able to visualize the tissue of Aru's body. Kai had no prior knowledge of biology, but he now knows that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And with this valuable knowledge, he is able to heal Aru's wounds. Kai is honestly surprised that that worked, but it looks like Aru is going to need to rest for a while before she can get back up. In the meantime, Kai hears a commotion at the top of the valley, and he realizes the orcs are attacking. The Koras are practically defenseless against the massive orcs, so there isn't much they can do, but all of a sudden, Kai arrives and saves them by stabbing one of the orcs through the chest. In the time he was gone, a few of the Koras had already been killed, and the culprit is the orc leader. The orc leader displays its divine crest in an attempt to intimidate Kai, but its cleaver is still soaked with the blood of the Koras that it killed, so there's no way Kai is backing down until he gets his revenge. And he's not the only one who's outraged either, because he starts hearing a voice in his head telling him to kill the orc and instill fear in its heart before it dies. Kai realizes the voice is coming from the valley god, and as the valley god's guardian bearer, he is prepared to carry out its will. But before Kai begins fighting, Porik steps forward and says he will assist him. He may not be as powerful as Kai is, but he is also a guardian bearer, so he can handle himself in a fight. Kai appreciates the extra help because it will make this a lot easier. And just so the orcs know what they are up against, Kai turns back to them and activates his divine crest as well. The confidence on the face of the orcs disappears as they realize that now have to fight two guardian bearers, but their leader still forces them to attack, so they charge forward and both are immediately killed by Kai. One of the orcs tries to sneak up on Kai while he is distracted, but Porik rushes in and cuts it down to protect him. Kai thanks him for the help, but handling the weaker orcs is all Porik can manage, so he tells Kai he's going to have to fight the guardian bearer orc on his own. Kai picks up a cleaver and slowly starts walking towards the final orc. The orc realizes he is screwed, so it tries using talk no jutsu. This one knows how to speak the human language, so he tells Kai he doesn't need to fight because the orc only intended to attack the Korers, he says, so he didn't mean to offend Kai. Normally, Kai wouldn't be so angry, but not only did the orcs kill a bunch of the Korers, they also did it in Kai's valley. The orc sees the blue spiritual energy of a god emanating from Kai's body, so he starts begging for mercy. But Kai has no mercy to give, so the orc attacks him in a desperate attempt at survival. However, Kai cuts his arm off with his energy blade and stabs the orc through the chest to pull out its godstone. As Porik watches this happen, he is more certain than ever before that he is looking at the same god that took his eyes. A god has watched over the world since before the age of gods, the Arbitrator. This is the first time Kai has ever killed a guardian bearer, and Porik explains that when you drink a guardian bearer's godstone, you can inherit the power of the deceased guardian bearer. It is way more potent than a regular godstone, so it should give him a massive boost in power. Kai cuts the godstone in half, but before he drinks, he offers a portion of it to Porik. Porik asks Kai if he's sure about this, but Kai says Porik earned it when he helped fight against the orcs. Porik eventually agrees to accept it and thanks him for his generosity. They then drink the godstone, and Porik falls to his knees for a moment because the guardian bearer godstone has more of a kick to them than he anticipated. Kai seems to be fine at first, but a second later, he falls to the floor in agony. The Korers gather around and ask Kai if he's alright, but he tells them he just needs to rest for a bit, so he heads back down to the valley and warns them not to bother him or set foot in the valley without his permission. While Kai is resting, he has a nightmare from his childhood in this world. His original village was burned to the ground by a group of apes, forcing him to flee and seek refuge in Lag. The next morning, Kai wakes up and he is surprised to find himself covered by a blanket, and he is even more surprised when he realizes that Aru is sleeping next to him. He freaks out and asks Aru what she's doing, so she explains that she didn't want Kai to catch a cold, so she was keeping him warm. Kai may have saved her, but she was still sent here as an offering, so she swears to spend the rest of her life serving Kai to the best of her ability. Kai tells her he doesn't need to serve him, so she should just go home, but Aru says she can't do that. Porik told her that if she didn't fulfill her role as an offering, then great misfortune would befall all the Taurers, so she refuses to leave. Kai starts trying to convince her to go home anyway, but then he realizes the sun is up, so he needs to get back to the village of Lag before anyone figures out that he left. Kai jumps up the side of the valley, but he is shocked to see the rest of the Korers still waiting there for him. He thought they would have left by now, but while Porik is thankful that Kai saves them from the orcs, they don't really have anywhere to go. And since their old village was destroyed, they were hoping Kai would let them live here and devote themselves to the valley god. Kai kind of feels bad for them, so he agrees to let them live on the land surrounding the valley. However, he forbids them from entering the valley without his permission. He then gets ready to head back to Lag, but before he goes, Korers has something important he wants to tell him. A little while later, Kai returns to Lag, but as soon as he gets there, he has to deal with an upset Joes because he's late for their morning training session. She asks him what took so long, but Kai can't tell her he left the village to visit his valley, so he just says he overslept. A little while later, the chief approaches some of Kai's friends and asks them if they know where he is. Manso tells him that Kai is assigned to storage house duty today, so he should be near the castle, and once Vezin finds him, he challenges Kai to a duel. After hearing about how well Kai did when he protected Joes, Vezin wants to see how strong Kai is for himself. But of course, this is just a friendly mock battle, so he tells Kai he doesn't have to worry about getting killed. Kai is relieved that this isn't a death battle, but considering what Porik told him, he's going to have to be careful. He said Kai should keep his status as a guardian bearer hidden for now since it hasn't been long since he acquired his power and he will be an easy target until he masters it. That means Kai has to keep his divine crest hidden at all costs, so he needs to hold back against Vezin even though he is weaker. Vezin makes the first move, so Kai jumps out of the way and starts dodging all the strikes, but he is getting really worked up, so his divine crest is visible. Kai manages to calm himself down to make the divine crest go away, but he still needs to fight Vezin, so he charges forward and strikes him with a spear. Unfortunately, Vezin is so beefy that the spear shatters when Kai tries to hit him, so now Kai is forced to fight barehanded. And to Kai's credit, he doesn't give up, but just like man number 1 in the gorilla fight, Kai gets punted away. Kai just had the wind knocked out of him, so there's no way he can keep fighting, but luckily, Vezin was satisfied with his fight. He extends his hand to help Kai up, and since he has taken a liking to Kai, he says that from tomorrow onwards, he will personally train Kai. Kai doesn't want to do it, but he can't say no to an offer from the chief. Chose is amazed that Kai was able to hold his ground so well against her father, but Olva doesn't seem so impressed because he still thinks Kai is just a regular commoner. However, Jose is already busy thinking of her next training session with Kai. After Vezin leaves, Manso and the rest of Kai's friends come over to check on him. And once they know he's okay, they start laughing at him because he got stuck training with Vezin. With Jose and Vezin demanding Kai's attention all the time, he hasn't been able to leave the village for a while, but tonight he finally gets the opportunity to leave. Kai returns to the valley and he is excited to be back, but then he spots a house with a fire going and he gets mad because he thinks the Korras moved in despite his warning that this place was forbidden. However, when he goes to see who did this, he realizes it was just Aru. Kai forbade the Korras from entering the valley, but Aru never actually left, so she isn't breaking any rules. Plus, she has been preparing for Kai's return, so she brings out a plate of food she made for him. Kai was about to tell her to leave, but then he sees the food she made, and all of a sudden, he doesn't mind letting Aru stay in the valley anymore. Aru asks him if he likes the food she made, and Kai tells her it tastes great, but aside from the flavor, this is the largest meal he has ever had the pleasure of eating. He almost wishes he could stay here forever because his food portions back in the village are usually really tiny. But to Kai's surprise, the next day when he goes to the cafeteria to get his food for the day, he receives a decently sized portion. The lady tells him she's giving him extra because he has been working really hard lately. Kai is thankful for the extra food, but his friends get jealous, so they ask the lunch lady why Kai is the only one who gets special treatment. She then reminds them that they've been slacking off all day, so if they want extra food, they are going to have to work hard for it. Meanwhile, on the other side of the cafeteria, Elsa is serving some of the other villagers, but she was so distracted looking at Kai that she accidentally dumped a bunch of extra food on this random guy's plate, so now she has to convince him to give it back. Over the next few days, Kai continues his routine of sneaking out of the village at night to check up on the valley, and while he's there, he decides to help Aru build a house. But there's no way he can get it all done in one day, so the first thing he does is cut down a tree with his energy blade. The next morning, he returns to Lag and spends the day training with Jose, then that night, he goes back to the valley to continue building. He is starting to get used to coming and going without anyone noticing him, and he really enjoys life in both villages. One day, he and his friends are tasked with moving this huge boulder to make space for some new fields, but even with all of them working together, they can't budget at all. And seeing that everyone is struggling, Vezin decides to step in and help out for today. Everyone gives him some space, so Vezin grabs the boulder and starts lifting it with all his strength. Even for someone as strong as Vezin, a boulder like this is still a huge challenge. But after a few seconds, Vezin finally gets the rock out of the ground and even lifts it over his head. Now that the rock is out of the ground, this land can finally be tilled for farming, and with the extra farmland, the village of Lag will prosper even more, so Vezin is happy. Seeing Vezin like this motivates Kai to become a good guardian bearer just like him. So later that night, while Kai is in the valley, he starts practicing with his powers and attempts to make a flower grow. But no matter how much energy he pours into it, the flower just won't respond. He may be physically strong now, but there's still a lot that Kai needs to learn before he can call himself a proper guardian bearer. The next morning, Kai returns to Lag, and normally no one wakes up this early in the morning, but today, Kai runs into Elsa in the flower fields. He asks her why she's up so early, and she explains that she just wants to admire the flowers while they are in bloom. Kai has never really paid much attention to the flowers before, but he admits that they do look beautiful. Elsa says that these flowers remind her of the ones that used to grow in the village that she and Kai grew up in. Kai is confused, but Elsa goes on to talk about how when their village was burning down, they still tried to at least save the flowers. It takes Kai a second, but he eventually remembers that Elsa was part of his original village as well. Elsa is mad that Kai didn't remember her since she was right there with him when the village was destroyed, but in Kai's defense, he was really young back then, so most memories are fuzzy. Kai may not have been paying attention to Elsa, but she has definitely been paying attention to him, and she thinks it's amazing that he was able to earn Vezin's attention. However, Kai tells her he still has a long way to go because compared to Vezin, Kai is still a weakling. He still has a lot he needs to learn if he wants to become stronger, because that's the only way for him to survive. Elsa remembers Kai saying the same thing on the day their village burned down, But Kay's memory is still a bit foggy, so she explains what happened. While all the villagers were evacuating, they were suddenly attacked by an ape, and none of them knew how to fight, so they were doomed to be slaughtered. However, Kai fearlessly ran at the ape and grabbed its leg. Of course, Kai was way too weak to actually harm the ape, but his bravery bought enough time for Vezin to arrive and rescue them. Kai was relieved that Vezin saved them, but he was also frustrated by the fact that he could barely do anything to help, so he swore that he would do whatever it takes to grow stronger. But then again, his oath may not mean much since he forgot about it until now. Elsa tells him it actually means a lot to her, because on that day, even if it didn't feel like it, Kai saved all the villagers, so in her eyes he will always be a brave hero. Meanwhile, in the middle of the forest, the apes and the orcs are fighting each other, and the orc general is absolutely dominating the battle. Even ape guardian bearers stood no chance against him and was instantly beheaded. With this, the orcs acclaimed victory over the apes for this territory, and now their next target is Kay's Valley. And right now, Kai is blissfully unaware of the incoming threat. Nothing has happened to the valley yet, so Kai goes back to Lag, and the next morning he's put on storehouse duty. While there, he finds a grain of wheat on the floor and wonders if he can use this to make rice balls because he really wants to try them. Just then, Elsa walks up to him and she overheard Kai talking about rice balls, so she asks him if he can explain what it is. Kai doesn't really know how to explain it, but he knows it's supposed to be really tasty, even though he has never actually eaten one. A few moments later, Manso comes in and tells Kai he should stop chatting with Elsa and get back to work already because they still have a lot of bags to move. Kai apologizes and picks up more bags, and Vezin tells everyone to hurry and hide the bags of food in the cellar before the inspector gets here. Olva approaches Vezin and asks him if it is really necessary to hide the food from the inspector, but Vezin tells him that the village's food reserves are low, so if they don't hide some food from the inspector, then the villagers' food portions would shrink. Olha doesn't seem to care since a little starvation never hurt anyone, but Vezin actually cares about the well-being of his people, so he won't let anyone starve on his watch. Kai and his friends aren't sure about all the details, but they heard that an inspector is coming from the Central Plains, and they need to hide some of their food so he doesn't take it all. They also heard that the inspector is a guardian bearer who is even more powerful than Vezin, but he doesn't use his power for noble reasons like Vezin does. A few hours later, the inspector arrives, so the gate is open for him, and Vezin comes out to greet him. The first thing the inspector does is complain about the number of demi-humans in the area because he got attacked by some apes on the way here. According to the inspector, there were around 10 apes there, but he managed to fight them off on his own, so he is alright. Jobs is impressed because it takes some serious strength to take down 10 apes on your own, but she's not impressed when she actually meets him. Gandalf looks like a toad, and the first thing he does is insult her for being a weak woman. He then insults Olha as well for being weak and neglecting his duty to kill all the demi-humans in the area, and neither of them can talk back to him. A few seconds later, another man enters the village gate, so Vezin asks him if he is part of Gandalf's group. However, that's not the case. The man says his name is Nada, and he was sent here by the monastery of Maz. He just happened to follow the same path as Gandalf, which is why they arrived at the same time. Gandalf goes to inspect the village's storehouse, and he is disappointed because there isn't much grain here. As a tax collector, Gandalf takes great pride in taking as much as he can from small villages, so he asks Vezin if this is really all the grain that the village has stored up. Vezin swears that he would never even consider evading taxes and assures Gandalf that this is all the grain that the village has. He makes up an excuse that the weather has been poor lately, so they haven't been able to grow much. However, Gandalf decides to use the weather as an excuse to stay in Lag for a while because he is suspicious. Mazin has no choice but to agree to Gandalf's request, but this basically means they are going to be forced to pay for all of Gandalf's luxury demands. Jobs doesn't like it, but Vezin tells her there's nothing they can do because Gandalf is an official inspector, and going against him is the same as going against the king. A little while later, Kai is walking outside when he sees Nada tending to one of the graves. He thanks him for looking after the graves, but Nada says he is just doing his job as a monk. He has heard rumors about Kai and knows that he suddenly became strong after eating a ton of God's stones, so he says the same thing happened to him. As part of his training at the monastery, Nada has had to eat a lot of God's stones, allowing him to become really strong. Kai is intrigued and asks Nada if his strength is comparable to that of the Guardian Bearers, so Nada proudly displays his divine crest as proof of his strength. Kai is even more amazed now because he didn't realize that Nada was a Guardian Bearer, but Nada tells him that's not the case. He may have a divine crest, but he never actually received protection. Kai had no idea it was possible to get a divine crest without a god's protection, but according to Nada, if you train hard and grow strong enough, you can potentially manifest a divine crest. While Kai and Nada are talking, Gandalf has just been served an extravagant meal in the castle, But he isn't satisfied with what he has received. His server explains that this is the best they can do with their current food reserves, but Gandalf doesn't care and demands more food, even if a few of the villagers have to starve. As a result of Gandalf's demands, the portion sizes for the villagers' meals have become ridiculously tiny, and they aren't happy about it. They wish Gandalf would return to the capital already so they can go back to eating the way they used to, but they can't force him to leave. Meanwhile, in Vezin's room, Nada is having a meeting with him to discuss a serious matter. There have been sightings of a large group of orcs, and this group is much larger than normal, so Olha is worried that it may be an invasion. Nada assures him that he doesn't have to worry about that since the group isn't large enough to invade the human kingdom, but it's still a huge threat, so Nada would like to pursue the orcs. However, he isn't familiar with this area, so he asks if Vezin would offer some assistance. Vezin understands, so he says he will arrange for some people to escort Nada in his mission to hunt down the orcs. That night, Kai heads back to the valley and he has some bad news for Aru. He was chosen to be part of the squad that will help Nada track down the orcs that have been running loose in the area, so he won't be able to return her until the mission is over. Aru understands, but she is worried that Kai might never return to the valley again if he leaves. However, Kai assures her that he will return no matter what happens. After all, he is the guardian bearer of this valley, so he has a duty to protect it. Kai then climbs out of the valley to meet with Porik. He explains that he's going to be hunting a group of orcs that showed up in the area, and Porik suggests that they might be here looking for the group that Kai killed a few days ago. Kai thinks Porik might be right, but he doesn't think it will be a problem because he is prepared to handle whatever the orcs throw at him. The next morning, Gandalf is still lazing around like a bum while a squad is sent out to track down the orcs that Nada is looking for. Olha and Vezin watch as the squad departs, but Olha doesn't think it was a good idea to send Joes on this mission. Normally, Vezin would have sent Olha, but he has to go after the apes that supposedly attacked Gandalf on his way here. Besides, Kai is with her, and Vezin trusts him, so he is sure Joes will be alright. Just then, Elsa comes running out of the gate because she has something she wants to give Kai. She did her best to recreate those rice balls Kai was talking about by using wheat, and she would like him to try it. Kai thanks her for the thoughtful gift, and for some reason, whenever looking at the rice balls reminds him of his mother, even though he has been an orphan all of his life in this world. Manso then calls out to Kai and tells him to hurry up, so Kai thanks Elsa again and puts the wheat balls in his shirt for later. The group then heads out, and after traveling for a while, they come across a horrific scene. There are dozens of dead apes and orcs scattered all over the place, and Nada believes that the orcs they are chasing must have gotten in a fight with the apes. However, there are a lot more ape corpses than there are orcs, but it looks like the orcs won the battle. But Kai has no idea why the orcs would do something like this. Chose tells Kai that they might be pursuing the same thing that Nada is after because she overheard his discussion with Vezin and Olha last night, although she didn't catch all the details. Nada comes over, and since Kai and Joes are curious, he explains that he is here because of a prophecy. According to the prophecy, a powerful god is supposed to appear in these lands, and it is Nada's job to find this god and its gravestone before it falls into the wrong hands. It is said that whichever species claims the god will acquire incredible power, so he can't afford to let the demi-humans find it first. Kai asks what kind of god this is supposed to be, so Nada tells him it is a wild spirit that no one can control. It has unfathomable power, and it is impartial to good or evil, kind of like an arbitrator. After hearing this, with everything that happened in the valley, Kai realizes that the god Nada is looking for might be him, but he can't tell him that. The group continues walking, and after a while, they come across a village that is in complete ruin. Kai thinks the orcs might have had something to do with this, and before long believes this must have been the work of the orcs, and Joes immediately rushes forward because she wants to help the villagers who got attacked. Nada warns her that it could be dangerous down there, but she can't just ignore people who are in trouble. Once they arrive at the village, they discover that a lot of the homes have been destroyed, and there are a few dead Uzels on the floor over there. The Uzels are a quiet and peaceful species, so they aren't hostile towards humans, but whatever did this definitely was. Kai spots an orc axe on one of the fences, so everyone is immediately put on guard, and they tell Joes that they should get out of here before any more orcs show up. However, Joes thinks some of the Uzels may have been able to survive, so she's not leaving until she searches the village for survivors. Nada also thinks they should search the village, but mostly because he wants to take a look at the land got here. In that case, Manso asks Kai to go with Nada while the rest of them stay behind to guard Joes. As Joes and the others walk through the village, they discuss how strange this situation is. The village is completely empty, yet the damage to the buildings is minimal. Normally, orcs would cause much more destruction if they were going to attack a village like this. Just then, Joes notices some blood on the ground, and the trail leads over to a shed, so she thinks there might be an injured Uzel inside. Meanwhile, Kai and Nada head into the village shrine to take a look at their god's gravestone. It is pretty dark, so Nada decides to use his spiritual energy to create some fire, but Kai warns him not to draw too much attention because there might be orcs nearby. Nada is surprised that Kai is so calm because most people would freak out upon seeing a man create fire from nothing. He wonders if Kai has seen a technique like this before, but Kai can't exactly explain that he knows how to use fire too, so he just tells Nada he heard about it from a story. Although Nada doesn't seem to fully believe him. Back on the surface, Joes calls out to the person inside the shed and says she isn't going to harm them, but as she opens the door, the only thing that comes out is a dead orc. As for Kai and Nada, they have finally found the gravestone, so Nada takes out a little notebook and uses it to translate the words on the gravestone. Meanwhile, Kai goes around the back to secure the area, but to his surprise, he finds a Uzel girl lying on the floor. Kai and Nada take her back to the surface, and along with the Uzels, they found 3 orc corpses in total. Seeing as there are only 3 orcs, Nada realizes that this isn't the orcs' main force, and judging by the woman's clothes, it looks like she was this village's guardian bearer. The others are surprised to hear that since female guardian bearers like Joe's are rare. And according to Nada, the Uzel's guardian bearer was clutching the entire fight alone. Uzels by nature are very weak, so normally they could never hope to defeat even a single orc. Yet this woman was able to kill the 3 orcs to allow some of her people to escape, even if it did end up costing her life. And knowing that other female guardian bearers can accomplish such great things gives Joe's hope that she can also be strong enough to fight and protect the things she cares about. They all hold a little funeral in honor of the dead Uzels and their guardian bearer, but it looks like the guardian bearer's godstone was taken, so her land god's protection was probably transferred to another person. Speaking of land gods, Menso asks if Nada found what he was looking for when they went down into the shrine, but the god here wasn't the prophesied one. There were only 2 paths after the Orc Ape battlefield, so if only 3 orcs came this way, then that must mean that the main force went the other way. Kai takes one look at the map and realizes that the path Nada is talking about leads straight to his valley, so he immediately volunteers to run out ahead to check things out because he can't let the orcs invade his valley. Nada thinks it's strange that Kai seems so motivated about this, but he decides to let him scout ahead, so Kai takes off running. Meanwhile, in the valley, Porik and the other quarters have just learnt that a group of orcs is heading straight for this valley. Porik knows that without Kai here, they are pretty much doomed, so he tells Kechek to gather as many people as he can and hide while Porik faces the orcs. He is aware that he stands no chance, but as his people's guardian bearer, he can't sit around and let them be slaughtered, so he plans to hold them off and hope that Kai can make it here in time to save them. That same night, Olha and his men close in on the apes that were seen near Lag, and to his surprise, there's an entire camp of them out here, and they seem like they are preparing for an attack. His men suggest they should regroup with the rest of their squad and come back to attack later, but Olha doesn't want to wait that long. His men try to stop him because there aren't enough of them here to handle all the apes, but Olha doesn't care. It would be one thing if he were worried about the apes launching an attack while they retreat, but Olha's reason for wanting to rush into this fight is because he wants to gain Gandalf's approval. Fortunately, no one agrees with him, so Olha eventually agrees to return to Lag and regroup before attacking the apes. Meanwhile, the other group has set up camp near the destroyed village, and Kay's friends are wondering if he managed to find the orc horde or not. They can't do anything until Kai returns and tells them the location of the orcs, but it's been a while now, so they're starting to worry for Kay's safety. Joes is especially worried, so she starts wondering if she should have gone with Kai. She even considers running after him to try to catch up, but the others tell her she can't do that. Their job is to make sure that Joes is safe at all times, and Kai wouldn't want her to throw herself into danger for no reason. Nada comes up to Joes and tells her she doesn't need to worry so much because Kai is an incredibly capable fighter, so he probably won't die out there. Either way, all they can do is trust in Kay's strength, but with that said, Nada tells everyone that he's heading to the top of the hill. Manso asks him why he's going there, so Nada explains that he's going to pray for Kay's safe return, but in reality, he goes up there to perform a special technique that allows him to keep track of what Kai is doing. For some reason, he gets the feeling that Kai knows more about the Valley God than he is willing to admit, so Nada begins meditating and 2 glowing eyeballs appear above him. Nada then sends these eyeballs out into the forest to find Kai, and on Kay's end, he is currently running full sprint to make it to the valley before it's too late. Along the way, he notices a ton of orc footprints in the dirt, and it looks like all of them are heading straight for the valley. Just then, Kai hears some rustling in the bushes, and a few seconds later, someone jumps out and attacks Kai with a knife. Kai draws his own blade as well. He was ready to shank his attacker on the spot, but then he realizes it was just Kechek. The rest of the Korors come out a few moments later, and Kai is relieved that it wasn't an orc, but he is also curious as to why the Korors are out here in the first place. Porik explains that they heard orcs approaching the valley, so they came out here to confirm their movement and possibly hold them off. However, Kai says they didn't need to do all of that. He is the guardian bearer of the valley, so it is his job to protect it, but Kachek says he and the rest of the Korers also have a right to defend the valley because they've built their new village around it, so they won't abandon it. Kai is glad to know that the Korers will stick by his side, but just then, they hear a loud noise nearby, and after investigating, Kai realizes that the band of orcs really is coming this way. And unfortunately, the leader of the orcs spots him, so he's going to have to fight. While Kai is out risking his life, Gandalf is back in lag, stuffing his face and wasting as much of the villagers' food as he can. He disrespectfully smashes a plate on the ground and declares that as an inspector, everyone must treat him with the utmost respect, otherwise he will be forced to question their loyalty to the King of Humans. Elsa bends down to start cleaning up the plate that Gandalf smashed, but then Gandalf gets a good look at her and realizes she is really pretty, so he asks her what her name is. Elsa is a bit confused as to why Gandalf is talking to her, but she tells him her name, and then Gandalf demands that she pour him a drink. She knows exactly where this is going, and frankly, she's disgusted by the look on Gandalf's face, but with his status, she is in no position to refuse a direct request from him, so she doesn't know what to do. Fortunately, Adelia steps in and places a new plate of food on Gandalf's table to distract him from making any advances at Elsa. She then pours him a drink with a smile so he can't ask Elsa to do it, and even Gandalf is surprised by how quickly he got shot down. A little while later, Elsa thanks Adelia for her help earlier, but Adelia says it wasn't a big deal. Suddenly, Olha and his second-in-command return, and Olha is clearly pissed that he didn't get the chance to fight the apes, so he yells for someone to call his father so he can mobilize a larger squad to take them out. Back to Kai, one of the orcs is currently chasing after him, but as it tries to strike, Kai turns around and stabs it through the chest. However, while Kai's back was turned, another orc tries to sneak attack him, but before Kai could be hit, Kechak stabbed it in the neck. So far, they've managed to take down a good portion of the orc soldiers, so the rest of the orcs are starting to reevaluate their choices a little. But all of a sudden, their leader arrives and calmly begins walking out to the front line. It then displays its divine crest to intimidate Kai. But while Kai doesn't think there's anything special about it, Porik recognizes that crest is one of the rigged arrows. Kai has no idea what rigged arrows is supposed to mean, so Porik explains that among the orcs, there are 6 exceptional warriors with powerful land gods. These orcs are called the rigged arrows, and they are capable of far more than your average guardian bearer. Kai warns everyone to stay back because he's going to have to go all out to defeat the orc leader. Nada sees all of this happen and he had his suspicions before, but now that he has seen Kai's divine crest, he is certain that Kai is the one he has been looking for. The orc Kai is up against is named Adurakan, and he knows how to speak the human language, so he says something about being surprised that Kai's predecessor is dead. He hadn't heard any rumors about the Valley God recently, so it was difficult to track down, but then one of his troops got taken out around here. So he decided to track them down, and sure enough, it led him to the new Valley God. The Valley God begins speaking to Kai and tells him to kill the orc, but Kai was already planning to do that, so he charges forward and tries to stab him. But Adurakan blocks and strikes back, so Kai is forced to jump away to avoid getting hit. He then tries to stab Adurakan again, but this time, Adurakan simply smacks him away and calls Kai weak. Kai realizes he can't beat Adurakan in a head-on clash, so instead he ducks between Adurakan's legs and tries to stab him from behind, but even though he has a clear shot, Raken's skin is just too tough for him to pierce, so his spear snaps. However, Kai still has a plan, so as Raken swings at him, he ducks down and kicks the spear tip straight into Raken's side. This finally does some damage to him, and the Korers are excited because Kai might actually win this. But to everyone's dismay, Raken's wound closes up instantly, and once he is back on his feet, he immediately pins Kai to the ground. Kijek asks if all Guardian Bearers are capable of that, but Porik tells him what Raken just did is not normal. In fact, he is starting to worry that Raken might be immortal. Raken lifts Kai up while the rest of the orcs cheer him on, and he calls Kai a sorry excuse for a god. Kai tries struggling to get himself free, but with Raken's grip on his throat, Kai's body eventually goes limp. Raken tells Kai that he's going to enjoy taking everything that he cares about from him. After he kills Kai, he's going to invade the valley and kill everyone there just for fun, but Kai refuses to let that happen. He musters as much strength as he can and grabs onto Raken's arm before blasting it with fire, and the pain from being burnt caused Raken to throw Kai to the ground. Kai is now back on his feet, so he can continue fighting, and the fires seem to work pretty well against Raken. So Kai turns up the heat and blasts Raken with even more flames. However, this time Raken doesn't burn. Instead, he runs through the fire and punts Kai away. The others don't understand how Raken could have survived that wall of fire, so Raken explains that his god's spirit is always protecting him. Raken's god grants him the ability to heal from or nullify any attacks that he can understand, and now that he knows of Kai's fire trick, it won't work on him anymore. Kai is running out of options and weapons, so he pulls out his knife and takes a defensive stance, but he has no idea what he's supposed to do here. No physical attacks will work, and magic is pretty much useless against Raken now, so all Kai can do is hope for the best. He tries to stab Raken in the side, but the knife snaps on contact, so now he's really out of options. He then gets knocked to the ground by Raken, and Kai is starting to look like he has lost the will to fight. The Corvers are really worried because Raken's blessing is too strong for Kai to overcome, and Nada is concerned that if Kai dies here, then the Valley God's power is going to fall into the hands of the demi-humans. Raken looks down at Kai and calls him a disgrace of a god, and Kai is racking his brain to think of something to do, because at this rate, the valley and everyone in it is going to be destroyed. Just then, Kai looks up and spots the rice balls that Elsa made for him, and seeing those rice balls reminds him of all the otherworldly knowledge he possesses. He suddenly remembers that he has one more trick up his sleeve, and it's all thanks to Elsa's gift. Raken stands over Kai and mockingly asks if he is ready to accept his fate, but Kai is simply planning out his attack. The power of Raken's god allows him to nullify the damage of any attack that he understands, but that only applies to things that people know about in this world. Kai doesn't understand much about these atoms and molecules that he recalls, but he knows for certain that neither Raken nor his god have ever heard of them, so he shouldn't be able to nullify an attack from Kai's atom-splitting energy blade. As Raken confidently raises his axe to crush Kai's skull, Kai rushes forward, and before Raken even realizes what's happening, Kai uses his energy blade to slice between Raken's atoms and sever his arm completely. Raken has no idea what happened, and the Corvers are just as confused because they thought Raken's blessing protected him from all harm. But Raken clearly just lost an arm, so Kai must have done something different. Raken refuses to believe that he is losing, so he charges at Kai again, but that clearly wasn't a smart move because Kai slashes him across the chest, and in a matter of seconds, Raken falls to the ground and draws his last breath. Nada saw the whole thing happen, and he is amazed by the things Kai is capable of. Not only can he use fire magic, but he was also capable of using magic that Nada has never seen before, so he's going to be cautious. Meanwhile, back at the ruined village, Manso is standing guard next to Joe's when all of a sudden, she collapses to the floor. Manso panics because he has no idea what's wrong with her, but then he and the others see a wound on her leg, and it looks pretty bad. Meanwhile, back in the forest, Kai has just taken Raken's godstone, and the rest of the orcs are watching with utter disappointment on their faces, but they know they stand no chance against Kai, so they keep their distance. Kai drinks Raken's godstone, and because Raken's god was so powerful, the power Kai receives from the godstone is incredible. His energy begins to radiate outward, and it's so potent that it scares all the orcs away, and Kai is really lucky that the orcs were scared away because a moment later, he falls to the ground unconscious from all the new power. Sometime later, Kai wakes up and he doesn't remember much of what happened, so he asks the Corvers. However, they are just as confused as he is because there was a sudden gust of wind after Kai drank Aduraken's godstone. Porik believes it might have been caused by the fact that Aduraken's land god is extremely powerful, so when Kai took Aduraken's strength for himself, it must have angered the god. The gust of wind was most likely the god screaming, but Kai had no idea the power of a god could do such a thing, and he is starting to wonder what he should do with all the strength he now possesses. For now, he heads down to the stream so he can wash the blood off his clothes, and once he's done with that, he asks Porik if he noticed anything strange during the fight. Kai was too busy to pay much attention to it, but he got the feeling that someone was watching him, and Porik could sense it too, but he decided to ignore it since he felt no hostility. However, it's still weird that someone was watching Kai. Kai plans to head back to the others now, so he says goodbye to the Corvers, but before he heads back, he decides to take a quick lunch break. He takes out the rice balls Elsa made, and he is going to have to do something to thank her once he gets back because without these, he might have died. Kai eventually makes it back to the others, and as soon as Manso spots him, he tells Kai that there's something wrong with Joe's. Kai rushes over to check on Joe's and immediately notices the mark on her leg, but he doesn't know what caused it. Nada soon shows up and says he recognizes that mark, but before he says anything more, he asks Kai what happened with the orcs he was tracking down. Kai tries to brush him off and says they need to focus on taking care of Joe's for now, but Nada insists on getting an answer. Kai lies and says he found the orcs, but they had been slaughtered by someone else by the time he arrived. Nada obviously knows Kai is lying, but he gained nothing by exposing him here, so he tells everyone that if the orcs have been taken care of, then they should take Joe's back to Lag so she can be treated. They head out immediately, but while they are carrying Joe's, Nada points out that Kai has orc blood on his shirt, which is odd since he claims he wasn't the one who killed the orcs. Kai makes up an excuse and says he must have accidentally touched one of the orc corpses. The group eventually returns to Lag, but once they arrive, they discover that it was attacked while they were gone. As Kai walks through the gates, he finds the troop leader, Basco, carrying one of the injured men, so he goes to ask him what happened here. Basco explains that the village was attacked by an unbelievable number of apes, but thanks to Vezin's efforts, they were able to drive them away. However, as you can see, the village was badly damaged in the attack. Kai rushes to the town hall where all the people who had their homes destroyed have gathered and yells out Elsa's name, hoping that she managed to survive the attack. Thankfully, he hears Elsa's voice down the hall, and while she might be a little hurt, she is still in one piece, and Kai is really glad to see her again. Meanwhile, the others bring Joes to Vezin, and he is shocked to see that Joes was affected as well. He reveals that Olha is suffering from the same symptoms and he knows what is causing it. Meanwhile, a scouting squad was sent out to gather some intel on the apes, and to their horror, they discover that the apes have called for reinforcements and are preparing for another attack. Meanwhile, back in the village, Kai is helping Elsa treat some of the wounded villagers, and he still can't believe that the village was this badly damaged. When the attack initially happened, Elsa ran here with her mother and younger sister. She was really scared, but recalling Kay's face made her feel safe. And as soon as Elsa says those words, Granny knows she and Kai are about to have a moment, so she excuses herself. After the granny leaves, Kai turns to Elsa and says he wants to thank her for the rice balls she made for him. But before he could finish his sentence, Manser shows up and says Vezin is looking for him. Kai immediately heads down to Vezin's quarters to give a report on what happened, and Vezin is glad that the orcs are no longer a threat, but they still have to deal with the apes. Kai asks about what happened to Joes and Olha, so Vezin tells him the apes put a curse on the land gods of Joes and Olha to take out the village's strongest fighters, and according to the scouts Vezin sent out earlier, it looks like the apes are going to launch another attack soon. Nada tells Vezin that if the curse is lifted, then Olha will be able to fight again, so he asks Kai to accompany him to dispel the curse. And the reason he is asking Kai is because he has faith in Kay's strength. Vezin also trusts Kai, so he wishes him luck and tells Kai that he will have to go to Olha's god in Elg and Jose's god in Ada. The survival of Lag hangs in the balance of this mission, so he is counting on Kai, and for the sake of Jose, Kai swears he will do his best. He and Nada then leave Vezin's room, but while heading down the stairs, they overhear Gandalf yelling, and even in this crisis, he is still being a total freeloader. Kai wishes Gandalf would do something to help the situation since he is a guardian bearer, but with how much of a bum Gandalf is, Nada doesn't think he is going to be of any use. Anyway, Nada needs to prepare a few things for the trip, so he tells Kai he will meet him over by the North Gate when he is ready. In the meantime, Kai goes to see Elsa and finally thanks her for the rice balls she made. Elsa is glad that her gift helped Kai out on his mission, but Kai tells her he has to go on another mission today. However, he assures her that he will be back as soon as possible, and when he returns, he promises to take Elsa somewhere very special. Elsa holds Kay's hands and tells him she will be looking forward to it, but as Kai leaves, she is already starting to miss him. Kai eventually meets Nada at the North Gate, and Nada seems to have received a bag from Vezin to help with dispelling the curse. Jose and Olha are still in a lot of pain. Fortunately, Kai and Nada have just arrived in the village of Elg, where Olha's land god is enshrined. If the apes really went out of their way to place a curse on the gravestone here, then they must be guarding it to stop anyone from dispelling the curse. Nada says he will go take a look, so he begins using his surveillance technique, and Kai recognizes it as the same thing he sensed during his battle against the Adurakan. Nada tells him this technique is called Thousand Eyes, and it is a secret technique that he learned at the monastery so he can see anything, no matter how far away it is. Once Nada is done, he tells Kai that there are only 5 apes guarding the gravestone, so the 2 of them should be able to handle it. As soon as they arrive at the gravestone, Kai springs into action and cuts the throat of one of the apes, following it up by stabbing 2 more. He then goes over to Nada to assist him, but Nada is clearly strong enough to handle himself in a fight. Kai is impressed by how skilled Nada is, but he failed to realize that his divine crest is visible. Nada already knew about this, but now that he has seen it with his own eyes, he gets down on one knee and asks Kai to use the power of the savage god to benefit the unified kingdom of men. Kai tells Nada there is no need for him to bow his head, but Kai really doesn't want to talk about this right now, so he says they should take care of the curse on Olha's land god. Nada agrees to drop the topic for now, so he begins cleaning up the gravestone while Kai stands guard. While Nada cleans, he explains to Kai that the unified kingdom needs a new and powerful god, but not just because they are trying to make the kingdom stronger. The truth is that the human kingdom is declining with each passing year, and the reason is because of people like Gandalf. The most powerful guardian bearers of the kingdom have become blinded by authority and the luxury it provides them, and as a result they have become lax in fulfilling their duties. This has severely diminished the power of the gods that support the king, and if nothing is done, the situation will continue to get worse. Nada explains that if the kingdom were still as strong as it once was, then reinforcements could have been deployed to assist during disasters like this. But with things as they are now, the number of tragedies will continue to rise year after year because their current roster of gods can't support the king anymore. That's why Nada has been looking for a new god to strengthen the kingdom, even if it means tearing down the current hierarchy. Nada then begins the ritual to dispel the curse, so Kai asks him what he is pouring on the gravestone. Nada explains that the god of Elg serves the god of Lag, so by pouring the blood of its guardian bearer, Vezin, the curse can be lifted. Once the blood vanishes, Nada tells Kai that the ritual is complete, so they need to move on to the village of Ida so they can dispel Jose's curse. Along the way, Nada begins giving another speech about how the world is changing. He points out the fact that the apes were so desperate that they were willing to weaken the land gods and destabilize the land just to win. Kai asks what he means by desperate, so Nada explains that according to his research, the ape nation is facing a great threat, one that may force them to abandon their homes, which is why they are invading the human nation to find a new place to live. It's the same with the orcs that Kai killed yesterday because they were looking for a new god in order to face the being that is threatening them in the north. With all the changes happening, Nada is worried that the kingdom of humans might be destroyed as a result, so he asks Kai to lend the power of his god to the kingdom of humans and save millions of lives. Nada's story sounds very convincing to Kai, but all of a sudden, the Valley God begins telling him to kill Nada so he isn't sure if he can trust him. He tells Nada to give him some time to think about it, and Nada agrees to wait, but he expects an answer by the time they dispel the curse on Jose's land god. Meanwhile, back in Lag, the mark on Olva's body has begun receding thanks to the efforts of Kai and Nada. And if Olva regains enough strength to join the fight, then the villagers of Lag have a good chance of surviving. Kai and Nada eventually make it to the gravestone in Ida, and after taking out the apes guarding it, Nada begins dispelling the curse. While he does that, Kai takes a walk outside and starts thinking about the power he now possesses. He's been wondering what to do with it, but if it's for a good cause like saving lives, then maybe that would be a good way to use it. But he still doesn't understand why the Valley God was so angry at Nada. Just then, Nada comes outside and asks if Kai has made his decision yet, but Kai still isn't sure. Nada tries to persuade Kai by telling him that if he joins the kingdom's mausoleum, then he will gain the favor of the God King, and his power will increase greatly. So much so that he could easily save the people of Lag, specifically those Kai cares about like Elsa and Jose. That sounds good, but Kai also cares about people outside of Lag, and he has a responsibility to protect the Korers because they have devoted themselves to him. However, Nada tells him he is going to have to abandon the Korers. Kai can't believe what Nada just said and asks him why, so Nada explains that the kingdom's mausoleum does not tolerate lowly demi-humans even if they are peaceful. Humans are superior in every way, so the idea of association with other species is out of the question. Kai asserts that the Korers are lowlives, but Nada completely ignores him. He then asks Kai to use his power for the humans and only humans, but if those are the terms of joining the kingdom, then Kai says he will have to refuse. Guardian bearers have a responsibility to protect their land god and the people that live there, so he can't just abandon the Korers. Nada asks if there's anything that could change Kai's mind, but Kai is firm on his answer. Surprisingly, Nada smiles and says he will just have to give up on recruiting Kai for now if he can't agree to the terms. He also promises to make up an excuse so his higher-ups don't come looking for Kai. Kai naively believes he is telling the truth, but a few moments later, Nada stabs him in the back. Kai falls to his knees and he is in disbelief because he never thought Nada would do something like this. Nada explains that he just stabbed Kai with a god-killing relic which has the power to break through the defenses of guarding bearers and temporarily restrict their strength. He tells Kai that he is arrogant for wanting to use his power for the people he cares about because all great power must be controlled by the kingdom, which is why he is going to kill Kai and steal his power by drinking his godstone. Kai tries to activate his divine crest to fight back, but with the god killer still piercing him, it causes him to suffer extreme pain. Nada then pins Kai down and pulls the god killer out of his back so he can land the finishing blow. He tells him not to worry because he will make sure Kai's name is mentioned in the history books, but before he could pull out Kai's godstone, Kai manages to slip out from under him and kicks Nada away. Meanwhile, back in Lag, the villagers are preparing their defenses for the incoming ape invasion, but they are all worried because they don't have any reinforcements to assist them. Vezin warns everyone that the apes could attack any minute now, and he knows they are all worried, but he assures them that he will do everything in his power to defend the village alongside them. All the able-bodied villagers are gathered outside in preparation for the battle, while those who were injured in the last attack are getting treated within the castle walls, including Elsa and her family. Back on Kai's end, Nada is trying to convince Kai to just let himself be killed for the sake of the human kingdom. He says the god's power could save countless human lives, and Kai doesn't doubt that, but he also needs to protect the people in his valley so he won't let Nada steal his power. Nada sees that there's no way Kai will ever change his mind, and his surprise attack failed, so he is prepared to fight him to the death. However, before Nada can make a move, an ape comes out of nowhere and attacks him with an axe. At the same time, the attack on the village has just begun, and the villagers are doing their best to hold their ground, but the apes are really good at throwing rocks, so they won't last long. That's when Vezin steps out to handle things personally. But deeper in the forest, the chief of the apes is approaching the battlefield, and he must have upgraded their tech tree because now the apes are throwing flaming rocks at the village. Back on Kay's end, a huge rock is thrown at Nada, so he is forced to retreat, but while he is running, he gets chased down by the ape and is attacked with an axe, so he is forced to fight back. Kai could have escaped now that Nada is busy, but unfortunately, there are two other apes, and they are both trying really hard to kill Kai. Kai is backed into a corner alongside Nada, and the three apes begin interrogating them. The leader reveals that he is a guardian bearer and asks Kai and Nada if they are the ones who dispelled the curse that was placed on the stone here. Neither of them responds, but that doesn't matter because the ape says he won't let them leave here alive. It turns out that all three of the apes are guardian bearers, so Nada is starting to get worried because he knows he can't handle them by himself. However, once Kai realizes that these are the apes who cursed Joes and Olha, he gets up with rage in his eyes and tells them they are going to pay for that. One of the apes tries to stab Kai with a spear, but Kai steps to the side to evade. And when the second ape tries to strike him, he jumps back, but before he could land, he gets caught on the spear and is thrown into the remains of a house. However, just as the ape was about to land a finishing blow, Kai is able to get back up and slash its stomach, but the wound wasn't deep enough to finish the ape off. And at the same time, Kay's wounds from earlier aren't healing because of that dagger Nada stabbed him with. Soon after, Nada shows up and starts asking where the apes went, but Kai isn't going to let himself get backstabbed again, so he gets ready to use his energy blade to take Nada out. However, before the two of them could start fighting, the apes begin taunting them from the shadows. Nada says he doesn't want to let the power of the arbitrator, God, fall into the hands of the apes, so as one of the apes attacks him, he tells them not to underestimate him and starts twirling his staff as a shield. However, he was not as strong as he thought because after a few hits from the ape, Nada gets knocked down and is now hitting the Yamcha pose. The ape then walks up to him and raises its axe to kill Nada. However, at the last second, Kai jumps in and saves him. Nada is shocked that Kai would go out of his way to help him after what he did earlier, but a moment later, the spear ape runs up to stab Kai, so Nada returns the favor and uses his flame magic to create a distraction so he and Kai can escape. Once Kai and Nada manage to make it to safety, Nada asks Kai why he chose to save someone who tried to kill him a few minutes ago. Kai says he was just acting on his instincts, and Nada finds that funny, but at the same time he is starting to understand why the arbitrator god chose to give Kai such tremendous power. The apes have begun searching for the two of them, and it's only a matter of time before they are found, so Nada says they need to come up with a strategy. Right now their chances aren't looking good, but Nada approaches Kai and tells him that if he is willing to listen to his instructions, then both of them can make it out of this alive. Kai asks Nada if he's sure he wants to help because if Kai survives this, then there's nothing stopping him from killing Nada, and Nada honestly wouldn't blame him if he did, but that's a problem for future Nada to deal with. Besides, he still hasn't gotten a chance to see just how powerful Kai truly is. Kai doesn't trust Nada, but he doesn't have much of a choice here, so he agrees to go along with Nada's plan. As the apes close in on their hiding spot, Kai runs out to draw their attention while Nada sneaks off to find a new hiding spot. What makes these apes so dangerous is their ability to hide so well in the environment despite their size, so Kai isn't able to pinpoint their location. But that's where Nada comes in because he uses his surveillance technique to locate the apes and then warns Kai before they attack. Thanks to Nada's callouts, as one of the apes tries to ambush Kai, he sees it coming and is able to decapitate it on the spot. Nada then warns him of another one coming from above, so Kai just stands there and uses his energy blade to slice it in half. Nada is amazed by what Kai is capable of, but in his amazement, he failed to keep track of his surroundings, so the final ape sneaks up on him, and even though Nada does his best to fight back, he gets stabbed through the chest. Nada drops his weapon and falls to the ground. Just when the ape thinks he has won, Kai comes falling from the sky and slices it in half. They have officially won the battle, or at least Kai has, because I don't think Nada is going to last very long with that spear in his lungs. Back in the village of Lag, Olha has finally recovered from the effects of the curse, so he gets up but he is really confused because he has no idea how this happened. Just then, he hears a commotion outside and he realizes it must be the apes, so he wants to get out of bed to go fight. His maid, Akui, tries stopping him because he isn't in good condition right now, but Olha can't afford to wait any longer, so he tells her to go get him a sword and a change of clothes, and Akui can't go against a direct order from Olha, so she agrees to do as he says. Meanwhile, Kai is trying his best to make sure Nada survives, so he drags him into a house and tries feeding him one of the god's stones from the apes. Nada finds it funny that Kai is working so hard to save him despite everything that happened, and normally drinking a god's stone would be enough to heal most wounds, but in this case, it would be pointless. Nada tells him that the ape's spear damaged his godstone, and there's nothing that can fix that. His vision has already begun to fade, so he tells Kai this is the end for him, but Kai refuses to accept that. He recalls that he has healing magic, so he tries using that to save Nada, but no matter how hard he tries to close the wound, nothing works. Nada recognizes what Kai is doing as a healing miracle, and he can't believe Kai managed to acquire a miracle on top of his invisible blade. He tells Kai that he has surpassed what a normal human should be capable of, and that is exactly the kind of power the world needs right now. Nada has accepted that he is going to die here, so he tells Kai to stop trying to heal him and reaches a hand to the sky to apologize to his high priest for failing the mission to retrieve the god. But he has no regrets because he got to witness the arbitrator god's phenomenal power firsthand. Nada then closes his eyes one final time, and as if on cue, rain begins pouring down on Kai. Back in Lag, Jose eventually wakes up, and she is confused because the last thing she remembers is collapsing in the Yuzal's village, yet now she's in her father's room. Just then, Jose hears a large crash outside, and a few moments later, Akui comes to check on her. Jose asks her what's going on, so Akui informs her that the apes are invading the village. She also has a message for her from Vezin, and according to Akui, if it comes down to it, Vezin wants Jose to flee Lag to ensure her survival. Jose feels hurt when she hears this because even though she understands that her father wants her to be safe, she can't believe he still doesn't trust her to fight on the battlefield alongside him. Jose heads out of her room and finds a ton of people sitting in the corridor, so she asks Akui what this is all about. Akui tells her that Vezin told all the women and children to come hide in the castle until the battle was over, but that's not what Jose meant. She was asking why the people are being kept in the corridor. Jose raises her voice and tells everyone that they can use her room, and they should feel free to use anything inside it as well. She also assures them that the Moloch family will fulfill its duty and defeat the apes, so they don't need to panic. At the same time, two of the soldiers enter Gandalf's room to warn him of the apes' attack, but they are shocked to see that he's not here. One of them thinks Gandalf might have gone out to help in the fight, but the other one tells him there's no way that would happen. With how lazy and selfish Gandalf is, it is much more likely that he fled as soon as the fight started, and the soldier was right because Gandalf is currently running out to the village gates. Just then, a rock comes flying his way and Gandalf freaks out. It looks like all the rumors about Gandalf being stronger than Vezin were false because in reality, he's just a cowardly weakling, and the only reason he made it this far in the first place is because he was relying on Nada's strength. Up on the wall, Elsa has been bringing the soldiers some food to restore their energy. She apologizes that she couldn't make something better for them, but the soldiers are really grateful for her kindness. Elsa is about to head back down to restock the supply of food rations when she spots Gandalf trying to get the front gate open. And she wonders if he's going out to help fight the apes, but then she hears him say he wants to return to the capital as soon as possible. He demands that they open the gates immediately, but the men have been trying for a while now, and they aren't strong enough to do it. Gandalf eventually realizes there's a crank for the gate, so he starts opening the gates, and when the others see this, they run down to stop him. They try to tell Gandalf that if he opens the gate right now, then the apes might be able to get in, but Gandalf couldn't care less. Instead of being reasonable and maybe climbing over the wall instead, Gandalf decides to stab the soldier captain in the gut and yells for everyone to stay out of his way. No one liked Gandalf to begin with, but now that he has killed one of their own, they are prepared to jump him. Unfortunately, Gandalf manages to grab Elsa and holds her hostage to stop anyone from attacking him. He couldn't care less what happens to this village as long as he gets out alive, so once his carriage arrives, he cuts the rope to open the gates. Gandalf then leaves while still holding Elsa hostage, and as soon as the apes realize that the gate is open, they march right through to destroy the village. With the gate breached, all the available soldiers are forced to form a defensive line, but most of them are no match for the apes, so Vezin jumps down from the wall to save them. He is able to easily defeat 3 of the normal apes, but there are still a lot of them left, so surviving this battle won't be easy. Meanwhile, Kai is running back to Lag as fast as he can because he knows that even with Vezin, they don't stand a chance of defending against the entire ape army. He still hasn't decided on what the proper way to use his power is, but he knows for sure that he wants to protect Lag, so that's what he's going to do. Back in Lag, a few of the officials are informed that the main gate has been breached, which is terrible news, but Vezin is there holding the apes off. However, hearing that Vezin is there makes the officials worry even more because they believe the apes are after Vezin's god's stone. At the same time, Gandalf is riding away from the mess he caused, and he knows this will be the end of the village of Lag, but he is glad he managed to kidnap a new toy for himself. However, Elsa has no intention of letting Gandalf anywhere near her, so she kicks him away. Back at Lag, Vezin is starting to get overwhelmed by the sheer number of apes, but Manso and the other soldiers come up with a great idea, so they paint divine crests onto their faces and act like they are guardian bearers. They are still regular soldiers, but the apes don't know that, so they are starting to get scared, and that hesitation is more than enough for Manso and the others to take out the apes. Now that all the paws inside have been taken care of, the rest of the soldiers try to block off the main gate to stop any more from coming in. But even though they managed to barricade it in time to stop any more apes from getting in, the apes are now trying to bust it down again, so it's only a matter of time before they break through. Manso and the others ask Vezin to leave and let them handle this area on their own because they can't risk him getting hurt. Vezin and the land god are practically the same person, so he needs to do whatever it takes to survive, because as long as he is alright, the village can eventually be rebuilt. Meanwhile, Kai is finally closing in on Lag, but he is shocked by the sheer number of apes here. The apes eventually notice Kai, so they all turn around and run towards him to attack, and Kai is ready for the fade. Back at the village, Ola considers running away for a brief moment, but then he is reminded of all the people whom he swore to protect, and he can't bring himself to turn his back on them. He asks one of the soldiers to go look after Joes and Olva to make sure the apes don't get to them, and in the meantime, he is going to remain here and fight. The apes eventually manage to break through the gate, so Vezin and the other soldiers get ready to fight. And Vezin can still easily overpower the regular apes, but now there are a few guardian bearers mixed into the ape forces, so he is starting to struggle. At the same time, Ola is slowly limping his way onto the battlefield, and even though he's not in good condition right now, he refuses to sit by and watch while the village is under attack. Once the other soldiers realize that Olha is here, they are all relieved because with an extra guardian bearer, they might have a fighting chance now. Olha is able to slash one of the apes in half with his sword as soon as he starts fighting, but due to his weakened state, he exhausts himself quickly. So when he faces one of the ape guardian bearers, his sword isn't able to cut through its neck, and he is knocked to the ground. The ape is about to finish Olha off, but at the last second, Joes jumps in to save him and blocks the strike with a shield. She manages to push the ape back, but her body is in a lot of pain since she hasn't properly recovered yet. She drops her shield and raises her spear to fight the ape. And while she may not be as strong as Olha or Vezin, she is very fast, so the ape can't keep track of her at all. And before it even realizes what's going on, Joes is able to jump into the air and slice its head off in one clean strike. Seeing Joes' victory gives all the soldiers a great sense of confidence, so they resume their fight against the apes, and with the combined strength of Vezin, Olha, and Joes, they are able to defeat the ape guardian bearers. Vezin looks over at Joes with pride because he had no idea that she had become such a competent fighter, but one of the dying apes tells him that a few extra guardian bearers won't be enough to save this village because their king is right outside. Vezin is a little worried, and strangely, the rest of the apes surrounding the village aren't attacking anymore, but it also doesn't look like they are retreating. Vezin goes to the wall to take a look, and to his surprise, he sees Kai ripping through the apes with his bare hands. He has no idea how Kai is doing that, but he seems like he's more than capable of handling the apes out there. So Vezin gets Kai's attention and throws a club over him so he can use it as a weapon. Kai catches the club, and with it, he begins laying waste to the entire ape army. Manso and the others are watching the whole thing unfold, and they can't believe what they are seeing. They already knew Kai was strong, but this level of strength is basically the same as a genuine guardian bearer. Vezin isn't sure why Kai is so strong either, but with him fighting on their side, they should be able to overcome the apes. After a few minutes, Kai has decimated most of the apes, and he doesn't look like he's slowing down at all, so the rest of the apes realize they stand no chance and flee back into the forest. This means they have officially defeated the apes, so all the soldiers begin cheering. Now that the battle is over, Olha walks over to Akwi and asks her what she thought of the fight. Akwi praises Olha's skill in combat and says it's all thanks to him that the village was saved. But while Olha made a large contribution, he knows the true hero here was Kai, the same boy that he once looked down on as a commoner. Everyone clearly saw Kai with his divine crest while he was fighting, so to keep his power a secret, he tells everyone that he painted the divine crest on and pretends to wipe it off. Just then, Vezin walks up to Kai and asks him where Nada is, but Kai tells him he has some bad news. While he and Nada were dispelling the curse in Ada village, they were attacked by 3 guardian bearer apes. Kai skips a lot of details, but the point is that Nada ended up dying to one of the apes and Kai failed to save him. Vezin is surprised to hear this since he knows Nada was as strong as a guardian bearer, so he wonders how he could have lost. Kai then tells him that one of the apes mentioned the attack on Lag, and as soon as he learned of it, he rushed over as soon as he could to help. But as a result, he never got to give Nada a proper burial. Bezin says he understands and he will send a small team to find Nada's body so they can take care of it. Just then, Elsa's younger sister comes over and asks if Kai has seen her anywhere. Kai had no idea Elsa was missing since the last time he saw her was when she evacuated to the castle, but now she's nowhere to be found. Mansa then comes over and tells everyone that when Gandalf was fleeing during the attack, he kidnapped Elsa and dragged her off in his carriage, but everyone was so busy dealing with the apes that they couldn't chase after him. As soon as Kai hears this, he takes off running in the direction Gandalf went because he has to rescue Elsa from him. But Mansa wonders how Kai intends to catch up to a carriage that has such a huge head start. Meanwhile, in Gandalf's carriage is looking out the window to check if it's safe, so his attendant tells him there shouldn't be any apes in this area, so there's nothing to worry about. Gandalf then asks him how long it will take to return to the capital, and he is told that they are still 1,000 miles away. Traveling 1,000 miles is going to take a while, so Gandalf intends to pass the time by toying with Elsa, but before he could actually do anything, he gets startled by a terrifying presence. He senses something approaching the carriage, so he uses his guardian bearer skills to enhance his vision and sees Kai running at him full sprint. Gandalf grabs a bow and arrow and plans to shoot Kai down before he gets too close, but Elsa refuses to let that happen. So she pushes Gandalf and ruins his perfect shot. Gandalf is enraged, so he takes out his sword to teach Elsa a lesson, but a moment later, the carriage begins to shake because the horses can feel Kay's pressure, and it's scaring them. The driver eventually loses control and the whole carriage crashes after hitting a rock. This flings Gandalf out onto the floor while the horses run away and the driver chases after them. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, one of Gandalf's men got impaled by a piece of wood during the crash, so he's done for. Kai runs up to the wrecked carriage to check on Elsa, but to his horror, he discovers that she was stabbed by Gandalf. He carries her out of the carriage and tries using his healing magic to help her recover, but her injuries are too severe for him to heal. Meanwhile, Gandalf suffers several broken bones from the crash, but with his guardian bearer power, he's able to heal himself and stand back up, but now he has to deal with Kai. Kai walks up to Gandalf and demands to know if he is the one who stabbed Elsa, and Gandalf can already tell that he stands no chance against Kai, so he starts trying to explain that it wasn't his fault. If anything, he says Kai is to blame for Elsa's condition, and Kai thinks he is just lying at first, but Gandalf explains that Kay's energy scares the horses and caused the carriage to crash, which led Gandalf to accidentally stab Elsa. Kai's anger falters for a second because he is starting to wonder if it really was his fault, but then he remembers that Gandalf kidnapped Elsa, so he is still to blame. Gandalf tries getting Kai to calm down for a second and tells him that he won't be able to get away with attacking an inspector, but Kai couldn't care less about Gandalf's status, so he grabs him by the neck and slams him to the ground. Gandalf begins saying he did nothing wrong because it is normal for the strong to take advantage of the weak, and commoners like Kai should never possess such power. But none of this is helping his case, so Kai grows tired of listening to Gandalf and rips his Godstone out of his chest. He may have successfully gotten revenge for what Gandalf did to Elsa, but he still has no idea how to save Elsa. But then he realizes that he can use Gandalf's Godstone to save her. By feeding it to her, it should give her enough energy to heal on her own, especially since it belonged to a guardian bearer. However, after Elsa drinks it, something goes terribly wrong and her body begins writhing in agony. Kai doesn't understand what's going on, and he doesn't know enough about guardian bearers to figure it out, so his only hope right now is to take Elsa to Porrick and see if he can help. But as he is running, several apes watch him from inside the tree line. Kai eventually gets to Porrick and explains the whole situation to see if he knows what's wrong with Elsa, and Porrick tells him that feeding Gandalf's Godstone to her was a dumb move. It is true that drinking a Godstone can help with the healing process, but Godstones from the same species can lead to severe poisoning unless precautions are taken. Worst case, Elsa is going to die from the poisoning, but there is still a way for her to be saved. So Porrick begins making preparations to make Elsa vomit up the Godstone. Kai leaves the tent to give Porrick some space to work, but once he steps outside, he spots 3 apes approaching him and becomes defensive. He asks them if they are here to attack his valet as well, but to his surprise, the apes all kneel down and praise him because they recognize the crest of the god Kanae, and they would like him to follow them back to their fiefdom. Some time passes, and the Chorus have been able to get Elsa to vomit up most of Gandalf's Godstone, and they've also given her some uric antidote, so now all they can do is wait and hope that she survives. Porrick heads outside to go inform Kai of Elsa's current condition, but as he leaves the tent, he is shocked to see several apes bowing at Kai's feet. He asks Kai what's going on, but Kai is just as confused as he is, so one of the apes speaks up. He says his name is Torud, and he once again pleads for Kai to accept their request, but Kai still has no idea what he's talking about. Porrick tells Torud to explain the problem, so he tells them that the ape land has become corrupted by someone, and from Porik's reaction, Kai can tell that this is a serious issue. Torrid goes on to explain that with the land and water corrupted, all the apes' food is gone, so all they can do is sit and wait to die out. The one responsible for all the corruption is the evil god, Diabo, and as soon as Kai hears that name, the arbitration god starts yelling in his head, telling Kai to destroy Diabo at all costs. It's so overwhelming that Kai is brought to his knees for a moment, but after he recovers, he turns to the apes and asks them why they think they have the right to ask him for help. Up until a moment ago, they were attacking Lag and nearly killed everyone he cares about, yet now they want him to save them. One of Torrid's subordinates becomes irritated and yells at Kai because he has killed a lot of their people as well, and if he doesn't help them, then the apes will just attack Lag again. But threatening to destroy Kai's home isn't really a good negotiation tactic, so Kai gets angry and tells them that if any of the apes attack his home again, then he's going to kill every last one of them with his own hands. Torrid begins to panic and orders his subordinate to apologize immediately to appease Kai's anger. But instead, the subordinate tells Kai that the only reason the apes attacked Lag is because they had no other choice. Their land has been corrupted and is now uninhabitable, so they need to find a new place to live as soon as possible. However, Kai couldn't care less about their problems after what they've done, so he tells them to leave and storms off into the tent. Porik follows him inside and sees Kai standing over Elsa's, so he tells him that they have finished treating her, but whether she survives or not will depend on the strength of her life force. Porik asks if Kai is willing to listen to the request that the apes made, but Kai points out that Elsa wouldn't be in the mess if they hadn't attacked Lag, so he doesn't plan to do anything to help them. Porik understands how Kai feels about this, but the apes made their petition to him according to the ancient customs, and since Kai is now the arbitration god, he cannot simply ignore them. He is known by many names: the god of Kanaya, the arbitration god, the valley god, but regardless all the different names he is called, all the races worship him equally. That's why the arbitration god is meant to be impartial to all the different tribes and protect them to maintain balance in the world. Kai thinks that's a lot of responsibility for one person to handle, since it sounds like Porik is asking him to save the world. But that's pretty much exactly what Porik means. Kai has inherited the power of the arbitration god, and this god is far more powerful than the various land gods that are scattered across the continent, so protecting the world is the arbitration god's destiny. Kai has a lot to think about, so he decides to head out to get some fresh air, and he's surprised to see that the apes are still there waiting for him. But he has nothing to say to them right now, so he simply walks past them. Kai then heads down into the valley and sits by the valley god's gravestone. He is still trying to wrap his head around this whole thing because it's hard to believe that he is expected to save the world now. And if the valley god's power is so amazing, then he asks why it was given to someone like him. He asks the valley god for answers, but the god remains silent, so in a fit of frustration, Kai starts using his powers on the two flowers at the base of the gravestone. However, he is stopped by Aru because she doesn't want him to hurt the poor flowers for no reason. Kai realizes he may have overreacted, so he gets up and decides to head back out of the valley, leaving Aru really confused since she has never seen Kai act like that before. Back at the top of the valley, Porik is having a friendly conversation with the apes, and he tells them he is impressed that they are so fluent in the human language. Just then, Kai returns, and he walks straight past the apes to tell Porik that he is going to return to Lag now. Torrid's subordinate gets agitated and asks if that means Kai is rejecting their request, but yells at him and says he's still thinking about it. He hasn't decided whether he's going to help the apes or not, but for now, he really needs to get back to Lag because they'll be worried if he doesn't return soon. He can't take Elsa back with him in her current condition, so he asks Porik to take care of her while he is gone. Kai then runs off, and once he is out of sight, Torrid asks Porik if he thinks Kai will actually agree to help them. Porik can't say that he knows what Kai will do, but he can say with confidence that Kai isn't the kind of person who would blindly ignore his duties. Eventually, Kai makes it back to Lag, and everyone is glad to see that he is alright. They ask him what happened out there, so Kai lies and says he wasn't able to track Gandalf down. After all, he can't exactly tell them that he killed the inspector or that he fed his godstone to Elsa, so he allows everyone to believe that Gandalf managed to escape with Elsa. Manso feels bad for Kai since he knows how close he and Elsa work, so he tells him he can go get some rest for now, but before that, Kai says he needs to speak with Vezin. A little while later, Kai is brought up to Vezin's office and tells him that the apes will most likely attack again in the near future. Everyone is shocked to hear this since they assume the apes wouldn't be coming back, but if there's really a chance that the apes could attack again, then they will need to prepare themselves for battle. There's nothing more for Kai to say, so it's time for him to go, but before he leaves, Vezin tells him that he was really impressed with Kai's performance in the last battle, and he's looking forward to seeing what you will accomplish in the future. As Kai steps out of the palace, he is approached by Elsa's sister, Lisa, and she's asking him where Elsa is. Before Kai left, he promised that he would bring Elsa back with him, but he can't explain what really happened, so he is forced to let Lisa believe that her sister is gone, and she blames him for all of it. Jodes comes up to Kai and tells him that everyone knows that lives are lost in a battle, but lately she's starting to wonder if the land gods may be getting them into fights to weed out the weak. She then looks over to the pile of ape corpses being harvested for their godstones, and she can't help but wonder if the apes had people they cared about as well. Just then, Olda shows up and asks Kai if he's the one who killed that pile of apes over there. He admits that Kai is a lot more impressive than he had initially thought, but he doesn't understand why Kai doesn't look happy, and it's starting to piss him off. Olha is jealous that Kai is the one who received all the praise because he thinks he could have done the same thing if he hadn't gotten cursed. He thinks that if he had been the one to slay the apes, then word of it might have gotten back to the kingdom, and it would have improved the Moloch family's status. He takes his sword and starts stabbing the ape corpse in frustration, but even if it's an ape, desecration of a corpse is heavily frowned upon, so Kai grabs Olda's arm to get him to stop. However, in a fit of rage, Olda pushes Kai to the ground and points his sword at him, saying he shouldn't get cocky because he won't be Lag's starfighter forever. Kai tells him he doesn't care about any of the praise or fame because as things are, more people are going to die if there's another battle. He'll be much happier if he could stop the apes from attacking altogether, but Olda tells him that will never happen since humans and demi-humans have been at war for generations and nothing is going to change that. However, Kai refuses to accept such a fate, so he has finally come to a decision and knows what he needs to do. He heads back up to Vezin's office and asks him for permission to go investigate the ape territory. Vezin is starting to get suspicious because it's weird that Kai wants to go out on another mission when he just got back, but even if Kai is hiding something, he still trusts him enough to handle himself out there. After making a few preparations, Kai is ready to head out, but before he goes, Menso gives him a new spear since his old one is broken. Joes also has a gift for him, so she tells Kai she wants him to take her knife with him. Kai is grateful, but he doesn't think he deserves such a valuable knife. However, Joes tells him to just take it already. She wants him to think of it as a good luck charm, and if he is ever in danger, she tells him to use it without hesitation. Kai thanks her for her thoughtfulness, but as he is leaving the village, he wonders if he will ever get to see Joes again. He doesn't know for sure whether he can defeat the evil god or not, but he has already decided to go through with it, so he's just going to have to do his best. Meanwhile, out in the desert, a few of the Korras are taking care of Gandalf's body so no one finds out what Kai did, and back at the Korra village, Kai informs the apes that he is willing to accept their request. The apes can hardly believe it, but Kai assures them that he is serious. However, he is only going to fulfill their request if they can promise they won't attack Lag while he is gone. The apes swear that they won't try to invade Lag anymore, so Kai is about to follow them so they can lead him to the ape land. However, before he leaves, Pork reminds him that there is still a lot of hatred between the apes and the humans, so if he travels into ape territory as he is now, he might encounter some trouble. To fix this, he gives Kai some traditional Korra's clothing, and as long as Kai is wearing this, any ape that sees him will assume he is a Korra as well. After that, Kai heads over to Elsa's tent to check on her one last time before he departs. He knows she probably can't hear him, but he tells her that her sister is really worried about her, and he's going to be gone for a while, so he hopes she will be better by the time he returns. He then leaves the tent, but to his surprise, as soon as he steps out, he sees the Korras holding the axe that belonged to the strong Orc Guardian bearer, Adurakan. Pork explains that they took the axe after Kai killed Adurakan, but it might prove useful to him if he gets into a fight in the ape territory. The axe is comically large for Kai's body, but he is able to swing it around pretty easily, so he decides to keep it. Kai and the others then begin their journey to the land of the apes. Meanwhile, over in the Human Kingdom's capital, a bunch of the powerful nobles are having a party when they receive word that Lag is under attack by the apes. However, they couldn't care less because Lag is a remote village, so even if it gets destroyed, it won't affect their lives at all. In fact, the reason they are able to enjoy such peaceful lives out here is because they routinely let small villages like Lag die out while fighting against the demi-humans, and they don't plan on stopping anytime soon. At the same time, Kai has finally made it to the apes' land, and the situation is just as bad as they had described because there's a thick black fog over the entire area. They begin walking through what's left of the ape settlements, and Kai spots a bunch of dead bodies nearby. The apes explain that those are the apes who were killed by Diabo, but Kai still doesn't know much about this evil god, so he asked Pork for a little info. Pork has never met Diabo before, but he has heard of the legend, so he tells Kai that Diabo is a god that has appeared many times in this world and caused mayhem. The last time Diabo appeared, it was the previous arbitration god who defeated him, so the story has been passed down for generations. As a result of Diabo's curse on this land, plants cannot grow, even the fish in the river have all died. Torrid eventually leads Kai to a massive tree in the middle of the ape village and tells him the village chief, Abrador, is inside waiting for him, so Kai goes to meet with him, but he's not sure what to expect. Kai is brought inside where he meets Abrador, and Abrador is surprised that the new arbitration god is so small, but he's not one to judge. Kai is a little cautious about meeting the leader of the apes, but Abrador says he's not actually the ape king. Kai has a lot of questions at the moment, so he asks Abrador to explain what happened to this land, and depending on his answer, Kai will decide whether he is going to help or not. Abrador understands, so tells Kai that Diabo was summoned by the darkness of the apes, but Kai has no idea what that is. He asks Abrador what he means by darkness, so Abrador explains that their king lost his mind and suddenly began indulging in drink and pleasure, while completely disregarding all of his duties as king. As a result, the people began to suffer greatly, and their resentment towards the king grew until it reached their core. Hearing this reminds Kai of what Nada had told him before he died. The human nation is declining because of the lax attitude of the king, and whether it's the apes or the humans, once the leader is corrupt, the entire nation is bound to fall. Abrador goes on with his explanation and tells Kai that the previous king was eventually defeated in a power struggle, so one of his sons, Shendor, headed for the north in search of a new land god. As a result, Shendor went on a rampage through the northern regions until he finally managed to steal a land god from one of the locals. However, going on a killing spree earned him a lot of enemies, so the locals quickly cast numerous curses on the Shendor's new god. And the sheer number of curses they placed on him caused his godstone to shatter and allowed malevolent energy to overcome his body, turning him into Diabo. Shendor lost his mind and became a monster as a result, and after returning home, the first thing he did was eat his entire family alive. Unfortunately, he was so powerful that no one could stop him. So to this very moment, Shendor is still at large. As long as Shendor is running around free, the land of the apes will continue to waste away, and Abrador's protection will weaken even more than it already has. He crawls over to Kai and pleads with him for his help, because at this rate, their gods might abandon them entirely, and they might become nothing more than mindless beasts. Kai can tell that the apes are really in trouble here, so he feels bad for them. And the Valley God has started yelling at him to go defeat the Diabo, so Kai agrees to do it and vows that he will kill the Diabo. A few minutes later, the apes begin leading Kai to the last place that Shendor was spotted, the Ape King's castle. They eventually arrive at the castle, but before they could head in, a group of cloaked apes show up and surround them. The cloaked apes begin arguing with Torrid in the ape language. Kai has no idea what they are saying, so he asks for translation and is told that the cloaked apes are trying to kill Shendor on their own, so they don't want Kai stealing their glory. Kai can't believe the apes are seriously fighting amongst themselves at a time like this, but the cloaked apes tell him they don't need his help, because Lady Zaina can defeat Diabo all on her own. Torrid is surprised to hear that Zaina will be coming since he didn't know she had returned. Kai asks him who Zaina is supposed to be, but before he can get an answer, a deep rumbling sound is heard from within the castle, and everyone outside can feel just how powerful Diabo has become. Kai can't afford to waste any more time. He heads straight for the castle entrance, and when one of the cloaked apes tries to get in his way, he backhands him into the wall. The others follow Kai inside, and they all eventually arrive at an open space in the castle. There, they find several apes on the floor with tendrils coming from their bodies, and at the top of the pedestal, the Diabo is siphoning away their life force through the tendrils. A few moments later, Diabo notices Kai and the others, so it turns to face them, and Kai can tell that a monster like this shouldn't be allowed to exist, so he's about to draw his sword to fight it. But before he could do so, he hears a female voice yelling at Diabo. The voice belongs to Zaina, the champion the cloaked apes mentioned earlier. She looks confident. She might really be able to defeat Diabo. Torrid explains that Zaina is the youngest surviving member of the royal family, but she is still inexperienced, so Torrid doesn't think she is worthy of becoming the next ruler of the apes. Kai is really confused since he's not sure what Zaina plans to do to defeat Diabo, but then she summons a Dustwolf, and Torrid is utterly shocked by this. The Dustwolf is a powerful god that protects the northern lands, and it makes no sense for the guardian deity of the north to be helping Zaina. The sword Zaina is holding suddenly begins to glow, and Porik believes she must be using a magic item to control the Dustwolf, but Kai had no idea magic items like that even existed. Zaina orders the wolf to attack Diabo, so it jumps down and launches a massive fire blast at it, but even though the attack was very powerful, Diabo remains completely unharmed. Kai is surprised that such an impressive attack did no damage, but it looks like Diabo is resistant to all fire damage, so Zaina is going to have to think of something else. Zaina is starting to panic because she didn't come up with a backup plan in case the fire didn't work, so she tries ordering the wolf to attack again. However, the wolf is starting to resist the control of her magic item, so Zaina yells for her subordinates to help her. All of a sudden, a few apes run up to the wolf with a fistful of weed and shove it in the wolf's mouth. The wolf then inadvertently burns it all with its fire breath, and it is now way too high to fight back against Zaina's control. Kai asks Porik if he understands what just happened, so Porik explains that those apes most likely fed the wolf a calming herb to stop it from fighting back against Zaina, but too much of that herb can be poisonous, so they are playing a dangerous game here and Kai doesn't like it. Now that Zaina has control over the wolf again, she orders it to attack Diabo with its fangs, so the wolf jumps up and bites a chunk out of Diabo's neck. But in the process, the wolf gets sprayed with a ton of Diabo's blood, and as soon as the blood makes contact, the wolf passes out for some reason. Kai has no idea why the wolf went down when it didn't suffer any damage, but after seeing it fight, he believes he could defeat Diabo if he and the wolf worked together. As for why the wolf passed out, Tord explains that Diabo's entire body acts like a deadly poison and anyone afflicted with it is bound to die eventually. And that curse extends to more than just Diabo's blood, because the piece of flesh that the wolf ripped out of Diabo suddenly begins to move and starts draining the life force of the apes nearby. Tord says many of his kin were killed like this, but he thinks this is a great chance for Kai to attack Diabo and help raise Abrador's status while Zaina's group is distracted, but Kai says he doesn't care about the stupid ape power struggle. He runs over to the wolf and places his hand on its body to check if it is still alive. Thankfully, the wolf is still breathing, but its spiritual energy is really faint, and it feels like its godstone has been weakened somehow. Kai thinks the poison from Diabo might have done so much damage that it knocked the god of its godstone, and if that's the case, then Kai needs to act fast if he wants to save it. He begins channeling his energy into the wolf's godstone, and there's an electric reaction, so he can tell that it's working. However, before Kai goes any further, he is reminded of what happens to Elsa, and that makes him wonder if he should really use his powers like this. But all of a sudden, he is snapped out of it because Porik and the others are working hard to protect him while he's trying to save the wolf, and if things drag on much longer, then they might all end up dying. Kai realizes that he doesn't have time to worry about things like that, so he gets back to work and uses his powers to dive into the wolf's soul. Once he is in there, he sees some of the wolf's memories, specifically the moment that Zaina betrayed the wolf people and took control of it. Zaina didn't have anything personal against the wolf people, but she said she needed the Deuce power to restore her homeland, so she was willing to do anything to get it. Kai goes a little deeper into the wolf's soul until he eventually finds its godstone, and after charging it with more of his energy, a reaction occurs which revitalizes the wolf's soul and makes it go back to normal. Kai returns to his body shortly after that, and the wolf is already starting to heal from the poison damage, but it's going to take some time for it to get back on its feet, so Kai and the others are going to have to handle Diabo on their own for now. Kai is wondering what he should do to defeat Diabo, and all of a sudden, the Valley God starts speaking to him and says Kai should strike Diabo's Godstone to defeat it. But that's a lot easier said than done since Kai doesn't know what part of Diabo's body has the Godstone. Zaina watches as Kai battles what used to be her brother, and she recalls how things used to be with him. Zaina and Shender used to be forced to fight each other for the amusement of their siblings because they were weak, but one day Shender grew tired of the constant humiliation and decided that he would go on a journey to the north to become powerful. Zaina was also fed up with how her family had been treating her, since she took the opportunity to seek power as well, even if it meant killing and stealing from innocent people to do it. Eventually, she managed to get her hands on an unclaimed god, and thanks to the power of that god, she was able to become strong, so all that's left is for her to kill Diabo, and then she can claim her place on the ape throne and change this rotten world. She prepares to attack Diabo again, but then she realizes that the wolf is still on the ground over there, so she jumps down and tries to order it to attack Diabo in spite of its current state. She is about to hit the wolf for not listening to her, but Kai grabs her hand and tells her to leave the wolf alone because it hasn't fully healed yet. Zaina tells Kai he has no right to lecture her because she can do whatever she wants with her subordinates, but Kai tells her it isn't right to use your subordinates as disposable tools. Zaina scoffs at Kai and says she can tell that Kai is a peasant by the way he uses his powers, and she even accuses him of killing or stealing to acquire such great power in the first place. Kai has never done anything like that, but Zaina still insists that she and Kai are the same. She says they are both weaklings who are struggling against the way of this world, and she doesn't think someone like Kai is cut out to be arbitration god. While Kai and Zaina were arguing, Diabo attacks them with its tendrils, but before either of them could be hit, the wolf jumps in and bites the tendrils in half. Everyone is shocked that the wolf is still alright even after touching part of Diabo's body, and Porik believes it must have acquired protection against poison from its god. And that god seems to be Kai, so Zaina no longer has any control over the wolf and her magic tool crumbles. The wolf then charges straight at Diabo and bites a massive chunk out of its neck, but despite the severe wounds, Diabo remains alive and shrouds itself in a cloud of dark energy. The pillar of dark energy is so massive that it can be seen all the way from Lag, and even though they don't know what it is, they can tell that it's not good. Diabo's body begins to swell as it absorbs energy from the land, and Porik tells Kai that if they don't stop it soon, then the entire continent will eventually be consumed by Diabo's darkness. Diabo resumes its attack in full force, and the apes are having a hard time standing their ground against Diabo's poison tendrils, but the wolf is able to charge forward and rip them apart with no problem. Unfortunately, the wolf's poison resistance doesn't mean it is immune to the tendrils, because before long it is tied up and restrained mid-air. Zaina tries charging at Diabo, but she's in way over her head, so Kai runs to her aid and pushes her out of the way before she gets herself hurt. Once Kai is back on his feet, he reaches for his sword so he can slay Diabo once and for all, but to his dismay, he realizes his sword is gone, and a moment later, he gets eaten by Diabo. Porik can't believe what he just saw, and he is about to go try to save Kai, but Ketchik stops him because if he acts recklessly right now, he may end up getting absorbed by Diabo as well. Torrid has lost all hope at this point because no one has ever survived being swallowed by Diabo before, and if the arbitration god wasn't strong enough to defeat it, then there's no one who can stop it from destroying their land. Kai only got eaten because he was trying to save Zaina's life, but she calls him foolish for worrying about another person in the middle of a battle. Diablo hears Zaina yelling, so it turns its attention to her, but before it could charge at her, the wolf stops it by pulling on its tendrils. However, with the difference in strength, it won't be able to hold Diabo back for very long. Meanwhile, inside Diabo, Kai has just regained consciousness, and he's trying to figure out what happened to him. He is surrounded by walls of flesh, but this entire place smells like a godstone, and he can't muster enough strength to get out. He soon realizes that the walls are sucking the life force out of his body, and if he doesn't do something quickly, then he is bound to die. However, there isn't much he can do, so he now believes he was never qualified to wield the Valley God's power in the first place. Kai soon passes out, and the next time he opens his eyes, he finds himself in the middle of a forest with the Valley God telling him to kill Diabo as soon as possible. Kai tries to get up to answer the Valley God's call, but he still has no strength in his body, so he thinks there's no way for him to get out of here. A few moments later, Kai sees a glowing figure standing over in the distance, and it is telling him to kill Diabo, so Kai realizes this must be the Valley God. He asks the Valley God why he chose someone like him as his successor, because he doesn't have what it takes to save the world, but the Valley God just tells him to stand up and overcome death to show the world his light. The Valley God shows Kai a vision of what will eventually happen if he doesn't kill Diabo today, and Kai sees the land being corrupted by Diabo's energy. The corruption spreads so far that even Elsa and the rest of Kai's friends are all consumed, and Kai can't bear to see everyone die, so he is desperately trying to get up so he can save them. Meanwhile, over in Lag, dark clouds have begun to form in the sky. And even though Vezin isn't sure about what's causing it, he can tell that it's not good news, so he orders everyone to grab their weapons and get ready in case something happens. Inside Diabo, Kai still needs to find a way to survive, so he thinks about how Diabo is sucking the life force out of his body using the flesh walls. And to stop his life force from being drained, he needs something like a shell, so he managed to use his magic to create a layer of armor around his body. With this new form, Kai is able to rip through the flesh walls and break out of Diabo's body, much to everyone's surprise. Diabo tries to attack Kai with its tendrils again, but Kai catches them without even looking and rips them apart with his bare hands. He then draws his sword and stabs Diabo in the tail. But it's going to take a lot more than that to finish it off. Kai declares that today is the last day Diabo will ever see, and Diabo is so enraged that it lunges at him, but Duswolf jumps in and knocks Diabo out of the way. Zadina is shocked that Duswolf is willingly helping Kai because that means it must have acknowledged him as a worthy fighter, and all the other apes believe in Kai's strength as well. But Zaina refuses to acknowledge him because she's a hater. While Zaina is up there preying on Kai's downfall, Kai and Duswolf charge toward Diabo to finish it off. Kai knows he has to destroy Diabo's Godstone, but the monster is so big that he's not sure where the Godstone is located. So he decides to destroy its entire body. Duswolf runs ahead and grabs Diabo by the neck to hold it in place, and Kai jumps down from above while charging up his energy blade, and once he lands, he slices Diabo's head clean off his body. It looks like this is a clear victory for Kai, but unfortunately, Diabo's Godstone wasn't destroyed by his slash, so its head begins to regenerate. Kai realizes this must be the main body, so the Godstone is definitely somewhere in there, but Diabo has already realized that it stands no chance against Kai, so as soon as it grows some new legs, it starts running away. Kai refuses to let it escape, so he chases after Diabo's main body, but it turns out that the other half is still alive as well and is trying to rejoin the main body, so the others have to hold it back until Kai can finish off the main body. The main body is heading straight for the cave's exit, so Kai yells out to Zaina and tells her to block its path because if it escapes, it will consume every living thing on the land. Zaina is still jealous of Kai, but she's not an idiot, so she agrees to do as he asks and orders her men to raise their shields and stop Diabo at all costs. Zaina's men are able to keep Diabo contained long enough for Kai to catch up, so he jumps on top of it and punches for Diabo's body to try to get to its Godstone. However, it is too meaty for Kai to reach all the way in, so instead, he just rips Diabo's body apart. As a result, Diabo's Godstone is finally exposed, but the Godstone shape shifts one last time, so Kai still needs to keep fighting. Since this form is the Godstone, once Kai has destroyed it, Diabo will officially be dead, but it's not going to be that easy because all the destroyed pieces of Diabo are starting to move again. The flesh is trying to rejoin the Godstone, so everyone is doing their best to make sure that doesn't happen. And in the meantime, Zaina manages to pin Diabo to the floor. She knows she isn't strong enough to pierce his body on her own, so as much as she wanted to claim the glory for defeating it, she asks Kai to hurry up and finish Diabo off already. Kai wastes no time and jumps on top of Diabo to dig out its Godstone, but to his surprise, he realizes that the Godstone isn't in here anymore. Just then, another mass of flesh forms behind Zaina, so she's forced to back off, and Kai believes this must be the part that holds Diabo's Godstone, so he needs to destroy it quickly. Zaina comes back and stabs Diabo while it's not paying attention, and this gives Kai the perfect opportunity to finish it off, so he stabs Diabo with his energy blade and pulls out its Godstone. As Kai does this, the flesh masses of Diabo finally stop moving, but to make sure Diabo won't resurrect itself again, Kai cuts the Godstone in half. This officially puts an end to Diabo, but it doesn't look like it's over because an eye appears in the Godstone fluid, and it begins to rise as it releases the body of Shendor. The flesh of Diabo suddenly begins to vanish and Shendor opens his eyes once more. He is very confused, and as soon as he recognizes Zaina, he asks her what happened to Diabo. Zaina informs him that Diabo has been dealt with and Shendor is relieved to hear that, but he is still going to have to face severe consequences as the one who caused this whole mess in the first place. Kai is glad that he has finally accomplished his mission, but as soon as he relaxes, he ends up collapsing because he used up way too much energy during the fight against Diabo. Porik and Ketchuk rush over to check on him, and thankfully Kai says he's alright, but he's really hungry right now, so they'll get him something to eat once they get back to the ape village. Meanwhile, as Zaina helps Shendor up so they can go home, he asks her who the boy is, and she explains that he is the one who saved them. Shendor knows all of this was his fault, but before he faces the consequences, he wants to warn Zaina not to let power go to her head because it will lead her down a dark path. Zaina understands what he's trying to tell her because up until a moment ago, all she could think about was the glory she would gain from killing Diabo, but now she understands that saving the ape land should have been her top priority. A little while later, Kai wakes up in the Abrador's house and everyone is glad to see that he is alright. Thanks to him, the ape village has been restored to its former glory, and all the apes are excitedly celebrating outside. Kai heads out to see the people, and they all happily cheer for him as their savior. But that's not all because they've also prepared a great feast in Kai's honor. When Kai sees all the food that they have laid out for him, he's honestly really impressed because this is the largest meal anyone has ever prepared for him. Abrador tells him it's all his so he can dig in whenever he wants, and Kai is still really hungry from his fight earlier, so he digs in. The next morning, Kai is set to return home, so Abrador and the other apes bid him farewell. And because Kai saved their village, he has established a friendship with over 10,000 apes that live here. As Kai and his group are leaving the village, he spots Zaina standing nearby, so he walks up to her and asks what she wants. She says that even though this isn't how she wanted things to happen, the village is safe thanks to Kai, so as the queen, she wants to thank him for all this help. Kai is surprised to hear Zaina call herself the queen, but she's not claiming the title without reason. She reveals that she has inherited the ape people's royal god, so she is officially a queen of the apes. However, Abrador and the others still don't acknowledge her yet, so she says she is going to have to make them acknowledge her as queen one way or another. In any case, as the queen, it is her duty to properly thank Kai, so she tells him she will grant any one request he has. Since Zaina is offering, Kai says he wants her to release Duswolf immediately, but Zaina tells him Duswolf is already free. In order to inherit the royal god, she had to undo her contract with him, so he was released to return to his people in the mountains a while ago. Eventually, Kai makes it back to Lag, and Jose is in the middle of training when he walks up to her. She is glad that he made it back safely and asks how his mission went, so Kai tells her there are no more apes in the area. Jose finds that hard to believe, but Kai tells her he pursued them deep into the forest, so he's sure they won't attack their village again anytime soon. He also wants to thank Jose for lending him her sword because it really helped him get through a tough battle. Jose is glad that she was able to help him out, but she notices that something's a little different about Kai. Almost like he has more responsibility on his shoulders, but Kai doesn't think much has changed for him. Although he's a little confused because Jose has been holding onto his hand for an awfully long time now. Just then, Manso and the rest of Kai's friends show up, so Jose gets embarrassed and runs off. Vizen has been paying close attention to Kai lately, and he gets the feeling that Kai has matured a lot, but Basco doesn't see the difference. Just then, Olva comes out onto the terrace as well, and Vezin asks him if he is feeling better yet, and he seems to have made a full recovery, but he still has a few concerns. First of all, they haven't heard any news about Gandalf or the girl he kidnapped, and the scouts they sent out say he wasn't seen at any of the nearby villages, meaning he must have gone missing while he was fleeing. Vezin doesn't really care about what happened to Gandalf, but the Central Plain is likely going to blame them for Gandalf's disappearance, so you may need to ask the local count to intervene on their behalf. But for now, what's important is that everyone in Lag is safe. A little while later, Kai returns to the valley, and Elsa is still unconscious, so Aru has been taking care of her. Kai is obviously worried about Elsa, but Aru tells him Elsa has been getting stronger lately, so she should make a full recovery soon. The end.